Chapter 157. No matter how restless the world below was, it was always calm above the sea of clouds. In my eyes, the clouds slowly moved, combined, and changed according to their own rhythm. Just by looking at them, my heartbeat and thoughts slowed down, and my heart calmed down. However, the storm before me was obviously not in that state. Above the throne in the clouds, the raging whirlwind gathered into a pitch-black whirlpool of clouds. Thunder kept spilling out from within, and his voice was as loud and clear as thunder. That's right, this was him, not it. This was the powerful wind elemental god Camdion, the last of the 4 elemental gods, as well as the youngest one. Little thing, you're saying that stupid big rock actually intends to open a portal to the earth elemental plane in the mortal plane? That's impossible. Even he can't support such a huge consumption, and this is different from our original agreement. It seemed to be a question, but hearing this, I laughed. Agreement? Oh my, Lord Camdion, are you a newbie? You actually believe in a verbal agreement? Let me guess, your agreement is nothing more than fighting on your own, and the territory you conquer will belong to you. The storm continued to whirlpool, and the blurry face remained silent. However, this silence was enough to explain everything. From a certain standpoint, this rough agreement was the only one that could be accepted. Talking about trust with demons and evil gods, only you can think of that. Do you think that if you were in this position, and someone was willing to help you open a portal to the wind elemental plane, the wild gale planes, would you refuse? And your relationship with Amdiroken? Apart from a few special planes, the elements in a mortal plane must be kept in balance. Regarding the actual situation of the Asia continent, the great Saint Aristotle once proposed the theory of the 4 elements. In his eyes, all matter is composed of earth, water, air, and fire, and they correspond to the solid, liquid, gas, and plasma states of matter. At the same time, the 4 elements are the combination of dry, wet, cold, and warm. For example, dry and cold produce earth, and water is composed of wet and cold. Overall, balance must be maintained, and the elements can only compete for living space. This is the basic law of the world. From every point of view, the nature of the elements is different, but they are always aligned. The fire that represented high temperature and the ice that represented low temperature, the earth that represented solid state and the storm that represented free state. They competed with each other and reached a balance. This was determined by the basic nature of the elements. Do you think that after this world is connected to the earth elemental plane's rock gathering cave, there's still a place for you, the wind elemental god, to interfere? Who knows, maybe you and your race will be sealed in this world forever. There was still silence. However, judging from the thunderstorms that were surging around Camdion's gigantic body, the message that I wanted to convey had arrived. As an old rival of mine for many years, Camdion naturally knew that the moment the earth elemental plane was connected to the mortal plane, things wouldn't end well for him. This time, I am here representing the god of law to extend a friendship to a great existence like you. Why do you have to bow down to a junior? We can discuss many things in detail. Order faction? Do you think they are fundamentally different from those bastards from the Chaos faction? No, I only represent the god of law. Of course, there are also a few important figures that I can't reveal. I reached out my hand. Within the white crystal ball was a message that could only be received by the predetermined target. After the flashing ball of light finished transmitting the message, I crushed Camdion's hand. Do you think that you can make the great wind elemental god work for you with just your glib tongue? Get out. I don't want to see you right now. As Camdion's thunderous order for me to leave, I didn't say anything else and directly turned around to leave. However, there was a smile on my face. Based on my understanding of these old antiques, the fact that they didn't summon people to surround and attack me and instead asked me to leave meant that they were moved and grateful. There were no complete secrets in this world. It was impossible for the news of my meeting with Camdion to be completely secret. Parting on bad terms was the best outcome. In my estimation, the fact that they didn't draw their swords meant that the negotiation was successful. If that bastard really refused, he should have crushed it without even looking at it. Earth elemental god? Elemental fortress? Amdiroken, I found you a good opponent. TMPH, you can poach elves from the Order faction, but I can't poach wind elementals from the Chaos faction. In front of a country, war was an extension of politics. War was for benefits. Behind every seemingly sudden war, there were invisible arms and batons. At this point, I could more or less understand the Chaos faction's plans. From the perspective of the entire Holy War, the elemental invasion was just a prelude to the main course. Their core benefits were still to increase the intensity of the elemental tide in preparation for the main course. Perhaps it was apologetic to the beastmen and elves, but from a certain standpoint, their actions of war were just a form of loyalty. Or more importantly, it was a cover for the Chaos faction's true strategic goal. Link to the elemental planes? What a joke. If the elemental tide caused by the 4 elemental gods was 1, then the complete link to an elemental plane would be at least 10. In that case, all of the Chaos faction's strategic plans could be brought forward. If the demons and evil gods begin to invade now, who can stop them? More importantly, this isn't a game. As long as you achieve your goal, those enemies won't come to give you experience one by one. There's an 80% chance that they'll come together. It's impossible to open the elemental gate. Increasing the elemental tide was a gradual process. Countless elemental creatures were killed in the mortal plane and returned to their own elemental planes. The remaining elements would spread throughout the world, increasing the elemental tide. Even without mentioning the influence of the elemental fortress and the large number of earth elemental reinforcements on the battlefield, I didn't want to see the elemental gate truly open no matter what. But if I wanted to stop it, I met with a small problem. I couldn't win. Yes, I couldn't win. I had no chance of winning at all. The Earth Elemental God would definitely act personally to open the Earth Elemental plane. If I tried to stop him from opening the Elemental gate, he would definitely fight me to the death. Although Amdirokan wasn't a high-profile Elemental God and didn't have any famous deeds, just the fact that he had a bad relationship with the other 3 Elemental gods and was still able to survive until now was enough to show how powerful he was. It was said that as the oldest existence among the 4 elemental gods, if an elemental god died, a new elemental lord would advance to become an elemental god. He was publicly recognized as the strongest elemental god. His strength probably wouldn't be inferior to any other god. Semigods could still be killed by overwhelming numbers, but against such an existence, unless a true god acted, it would be a waste no matter how many people came. Thus, I thought of looking for help. I didn't need to consider the true gods from the Order faction, but wasn't the one who was hunting with the black-winged people right now Amdirokan's mortal enemy, Kamdaran? He was an enemy. Indeed, so what? The elves and the elven gods were still humans' allies. Every holy war was a reshuffling of power across the entire continent. Changing factions and betrayals were all too common. Thus, when I found out that Kamdaran and the winged people weren't too far from the Northlands, I didn't hesitate and personally came over. Even though it was not far, it would still take me at least half a month to get there. Completing the Earth Elemental Gate isn't something that can be done in a short period of time. Before that, the Chaos faction definitely doesn't want to see an early decisive battle. On the other hand, Antoon should be safe. I still had to deal with Kamdaran. These old antiques were especially particular about face and extravagance. It was already good enough for them to sweep those who didn't have enough weight out of the door. It was more normal for them to kill them along the way. Especially when it came to such an important matter, sincerity was even more important. Now that I had received the expected reply, I could finally be at ease. Stepping into the long-awaited Vulture assault airship, I began my journey back home. Even though I was in a temporary facility, the information from the front lines still hadn't been cut off. The pilot began to make preparations. The battlefield is still strangely calm. The elves seem to be reorganizing their army. The main armies of the 4 countries are being mobilized, and the total number of troops has already exceeded 150,000. Considering that the adult elves are at least silver rank in terms of combat strength, this is an extremely terrifying force. Out of the 3 walls of Antoon, only the innermost one is left. However, the siege has already stopped. San Antonio's army has already arrived in the northern lands and has officially taken over the defense of Red Maple City. If we were to return now, I'm afraid that we would meet with some small problems. The human allied army has already clashed with the beast men. Both sides have victories and defeats. Just as you expected, the other 3 beast men have already begun to gather together. This was a cage from the very start. Damn it, they actually dared to deceive the Demon Lord. Also, just as you expected, the second snowstorm has arrived. The heavy snow has sealed off the mountains, and right now, the various armies are all stuck in the cities. The resources that are being consumed every day are astronomical. Only high-level combatants are barely able to move about in this kind of hellish weather. You don't have to worry about missing the show of the year. Eliza's report carried a hint of resentment. It seemed that while she was teasing those Beastman chieftains, the Beastman chieftains didn't tell her the real battle plan, which made her very unhappy. And those messy miscellaneous matters, for example, those bastards from the Gentleman Alliance. Even when you weren't around, they came to look for me. My departure and temporary appointment caused many miscellaneous matters to fall onto her shoulders. However, from a certain perspective, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have left with peace of mind. Cough, don't I have something important to discuss? Right, how's the situation on our side? Our firearms business is selling like hotcakes. The uncharged magic sword has received unanimous praise after testing it. The orders for the magic explosion grenades can be queued up until the year after next. We won't be able to finish them even by next year. The profit from every transaction is at least 4 times the cost. We're making a killing. How's the training? The combat training for small squadrons is going smoothly, but there aren't many opportunities for military drills. Recently, there have been a lot of duels between high-level aerial mounts, but obviously, those aren't things that those brats can interfere in. Your Bone Dragon Knight Tymir recently beat up that Green Dragon Knight and Storm Dragon Knight, making a name for himself. He's already vaguely known as the #1 aerial mount of the Northern Lands. What about those little toys? The first batch of war machines has already arrived. We just came to an agreement with that black-faced fellow 2 days ago. The first batch of 3 types and 7 machines are specially used to deal with the Beastman's behemoth. The profit this time is at least 400,000 gold coins. As expected, there is nothing more valuable than selling firearms on the battlefield. Eliza paused for a moment, but her words carried a hint of hesitation. Isn't waiting for the war to escalate going against our original intentions? Hearing this, I could only smile bitterly. Of course, I didn't want the war to escalate, but this was a trap set up by the Chaos faction. Without the ability to break out of this trap, what else could I do? Stretch out my hand and crush Amdirokan to death? I think that I would be the one to die. I also want to stop the war immediately, but peace is something that can't be said. Only after enough blood has been shed will one truly look forward to peace and understand the value of peace. I can only hope that after this war, the Northern Lands will calm down for a few years, giving us enough time. Right, since there's nothing going on at home for the time being, I'm afraid that I will have to take a detour. You want to mediate the war. You want both sides to obediently return to the negotiation table. Other than a neutral stance, the most important thing is to have the strength to make both sides look at us. At the moment, I don't have either of these conditions, so I don't even know how to stop them. A long journey. Is there something more important? UN. In 3 days' time, it will be the Winter Veil Festival. That is also the day when the Mist Country's Knight is appointed. Returning to Donglan to celebrate the festival? You can't be that free, right? Of course it is a festival, but it isn't with humans. The day when the knight is appointed refers to a type of knight unique to the Mist Country. You should understand now. You are talking about Aurora Night. The Winter Veil Festival is also the day that we promised with Frigid Moor. If we miss it, we will have to wait for next year. Aren't we lacking in strength now? If I bring them back, we might have enough. Every year, the Winter Veil Festival is the day when the Mist Royalty and Frigid Moor agreed on the opening of the altar. Only on that day can the royalty retrieve the newborn Frigid Moor. If we were to go a year later, the formation of the Aurora Night Squadron would be delayed by a year. Since the frontline battle has been obstructed by the expected snowstorm, it is normal for us to take a detour to do our proper business. Alright, if there's nothing else, let's chat later. The latest news: the leader of the Kingdom of the Elves' army is King Adrian of the Tassel Kingdom. He is the target that you wanted me to pay attention to. I understand. I sighed. As expected, I knew that the ambitious Adrian wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. Can you tell me about your relationship with him? Eliza's question made me reminisce about that sunny and carefree elf. Probably, it's about the same as the relationship between you and me. Arth. As expected, you really do like men. Who turned you gay? Adam or Collos? I'm going to chop him up right now. I was instantly rendered speechless. What as expected? This is already that and that. Could it be that Eliza always thought that I was gay? Don't get the wrong idea, I'm not interested in men. I'm talking about the relationship between master and disciple, and the relationship where you chopped me up in the end. Sigh, my line of master and disciple seems to be all like this. Heloise, are you really cursed? Why do you always end up like this? How would I know? I only know that you chopped me up, and twice at that. Alright then, master and disciple who share the same fate. We looked at each other with tears in our eyes and trembled in agitation. It seems that we are all people with bitter fates. Die. Unfilial disciple. I don't have a disciple like you. Alright then, judging from how the bird was biting me, I probably misunderstood. The silly cat was just remembering the past and going crazy from anger. I casually grabbed the silly cat's neck, shook her twice, spun her around 3 times, and then sent her into the wastepaper basket that I had specially prepared for her. Cough, it seems that this really is a tradition. Eliza, remember to test your character first when you take on a disciple in the future. Relax, master, I have no intention of taking on a disciple. With the two of you acting as an example, what's the point of teaching a naughty child who needs so much effort to raise and will likely kill his or her master when he or she grows up? For some reason, hearing this comment, I felt a mysterious sense of sorrow. Was it that I had brought this upon myself? Yep, let's end this topic here. Eliza, be careful of Adrian. From a certain standpoint, he's your senior brother, and he's definitely not easy to deal with. Chapter 158. The snow is getting heavier. Looks like the supply team will be late again. Eliza looked at the heavy snow outside the window and could only shake her head helplessly. This was not the first time he had been delayed by the weather. At the beginning, he was burning with anxiety. After that, he was still helpless when he tried to contact his surroundings. Now, he was helpless and numb to the expected weather. It could be considered a helpless habit. After all, it wasn't just one side facing this terrible weather. Since both sides had stopped, there was nothing to be nervous about. It had to be said that the beast men chose a very delicate time to attack. The heavy snow made the war fall into a rather awkward situation. Fight the final battle? How could they fight while skating and shivering in the cold? Even the preparation and distribution of winter supplies was a major task. Even the strongest army had to learn to be respectful in front of the power of nature. Damn it, it would have been better if it had been half a month earlier. Maybe we should have waited until next spring. Every beastman would probably think so when they were shivering in the cold. In the past, they would have been sleeping around the bonfire in their winter quarters. This was like procrastination. Everything went according to plan, but as they prepared, many factors affected them, and they ended up at the most inopportune time. What? Traffic jam? No problem, there's still 2 hours. Wrong way. No problem, there's still an hour. Airport highway repair? No problem, probably. Yup, there's still half an hour, we won't be late. Hehe, we're finally here. I told you it was fine. What? Airport inspection? At least half an hour? Hey, stop joking. Don't leave the plane. Yup, that was more or less how it felt. It was just an analogy, definitely not someone's personal experience. Cough, to be honest, this was undoubtedly a scheme of someone and a certain demon lord. According to the Beastman's original strategy, they wouldn't have encountered such trouble. But now, Eliza didn't feel happy about her scheme succeeding. After all, as time went by, the war was getting more and more intense, and the burden on her body was a little too heavy. Yes, she had lied. How could everything be fine during a war? The beast men and elves weren't easy to deal with. Although the general situation was as she had described, the actual pressure was much greater. The Allied army suffered a lot of casualties every day. However, this was the only way that Roland could be at ease and do his job. I'll look after the house. It'll be fine. Didn't Roland teach me everything? At the very least, even that silly girl and can become the underground overlord. How can I not be able to take charge? In a sense, Eliza always had an inexplicable sense of competition for Anne. Even though her absolute strength now far surpassed Anne, she still hoped to prove to that person that she was the best leader. But obviously, there were some things that couldn't be taught. The current chaotic battlefield situation was much more difficult to deal with than the underground, where most of the enemy forces had been wiped out. The Beastman's aerial knight has come to challenge us again. This time, it's 2 Thunderhawk teams and that Dragon Knight. San Antonio wants Sir Tymir to fight, but Sir Tymir obviously hasn't recovered from his previous injury. San Antonio's own aerial knight? Don't they have the Griffin Knight Regiment? They even have a legendary Griffin Knight holding the line. Why don't they go up themselves? They said that Elson is sick. Their words are very harsh. They want us to prove our worth with our military achievements. Hearing this, Eliza just pushed her glasses expressionlessly. However, no one knew what she was thinking in her heart. A legendary Griffin Knight can be sick. I should have killed those bastards long ago. Flashing Red Knight Elson? Alright, I'll remember you. I'll wait patiently for the day you enter the STYX. Maybe, I'll personally send you down. In a sense, even in the human world, the super empire was a synonym for tyranny. In their eyes, being willing to support the 7 northern countries was already a great gift. How could a super empire accept the command of a small country? Naturally, the command of the Allied forces would be handed over to him. And under the premise that the leading Casomi duchy was only a vassal of San Antonio, from the moment the reinforcements arrived, the command of the Allied forces was handed over to these proud San Antonians. At this time, it was obvious that the San Antonians were very dissatisfied with Donglan, who was profiting from the war. Especially when they sent out the least reinforcements among the 6 northern countries. But the Donglan aerial knight was the lowest gold-ranked. Even San Antonio had to take them seriously. Therefore, in the name of the commander of the Allied forces, they requested for Donglan's aerial cavalry to fight. In the beginning, Donglan's Aurora Knight and Bone Dragon Knight did win consecutive duels. Even Donglan, who had been weak for many years, became famous at the same time. But the orcs no longer had the intention to duel. If they were to compare numbers, Donglan's new generation of aerial knight had not matured yet. The undead aerial cavalry was too few and they had to carry out other missions. Even Tymir was injured by the enemy's continuous attacks. What about the other Aurora Knight? Is there anyone who can fight? Even during the Mist Kingdom's peak, the weakest Aurora Knight that was above gold-ranked did not exceed 100. At this point in time, due to certain reasons, out of the 50-plus Aurora Knight in the Undead Knight Regiment, only 15 were in the north. Most of them were not in Red Maple City. 2 of the Aurora Knight's injuries have not healed yet. There are still 3 in good condition. The rest are carrying out scouting missions. Her Highness Renee applied for battle, but she was reprimanded by Lord Tymir. Obviously, even if the 3 Aurora Knight were all legendary ranked, it was not enough to deal with 2 squadrons of almost 100 aerial cavalry. Although the Aurora Knight was good enough to deal with aerial battles, the sky was not their best battlefield. Hearing that, Eliza fell into silence. She was hesitating if she should remove the seal and crush the Dragon Knight to death. After that, she would step on those arrogant San Antonians. But what would happen next would definitely be the collapse of her clone and the return of her consciousness to the abyss. If Roland was here, from a certain point of view, this was the first time Eliza was shouldering the heavy burden of a country alone. It was no wonder that she was hesitating. Even if she knew that this assumption was meaningless, she still instinctively considered this possibility. Lady Eliza, in fact, His Highness Roland had left a letter. After hesitating for a long time, the servant finally spoke. It seemed that the current situation had reached the predicament that he had expected. He could have contacted him directly, but he actually left a letter. Eliza was stunned for a moment. Then, she could only shake her head unwillingly. This fellow saw through me again. Yes, Roland knew Eliza's character from the start. So before he left, he naturally made preparations. And in order to take care of her pride, he obviously would not take it out unless it was such a crucial moment. Since you have seen this letter, then the situation is probably not good. Let me guess, the thing that troubled you but did not tell me is most likely the internal troubles of the Allied army. There are too many external factors in this war. The position of both sides is not stable. It is not surprising that someone will betray someone. Maintaining strength is the priority. As for the other countries, it does not matter if they offend all of them. As long as they cross the line, even if they are allies, there is no doubt that they will be looking for a beating. Just treat it as if you are in the abyss and learn how the old devils treat their allies. You are more familiar with their style of doing things than I am. Roland seemed unreliable, but in fact, he was extremely scheming. He trusted everyone, but he did not trust anyone deeply. From the beginning, he had made all kinds of plans and backups. In Roland's eyes, even if San Antonio did not come, it would be difficult for the sparsely populated Donglan to obtain the commanding authority of the Allied army. And once they lost the commanding authority, it would be difficult for them to even speak in the command center. This had nothing to do with one's ability and willpower. In this temporary Allied army, it was an iron law that whoever had the bigger fist would have the final say. And once the commander-in-chief fell into the hands of another country, one would definitely be used as cannon fodder. This wasn't because Roland thought too badly of others. Instead, it was because he judged others by his own standards. He firmly believed that if he had the commanding authority, he would definitely use the soldiers of other countries as cannon fodder and preserve his own main force. And the facts proved his conjecture. But since there were not many people on the surface, the Mist Kingdom actually suffered the least losses these days. The ones who suffered the most were the Kingdom of Rhodes and the Empire of Anzolo. During the intermittent skirmishes, their infantry regiment and knight regiment were dragged to the rear and the front line many times. At this time, the casualties were more than 30%, and there were many complaints. This was also the derivation of political factors on the battlefield. These two countries were the 4 southern countries of the 7 northern countries, the 4 countries leaning towards the south. Among the 4 southern countries, Sluware was on the brink of destruction, and Kasomi was his vassal state. On the other hand, the 3 northern countries did not listen to his commands. It was obvious who should be used as cannon fodder. The unluckiest was the Kingdom of Rhodes. They were politically leaning towards the north, but because the members of the royal family were all southern nobles, they were in the stranglehold of the southern country, San Antonio. As for the other 2 countries of the 3 northern countries other than Donglan, the Kingdom of Swar, a highland country with barbarian blood, and the Kingdom of Phoenix, which was as old as the Mist Kingdom, completely ignored the blind command of the people of San Antonio. Of course, this kind of thing could not be said directly. But putting aside those appearances and cover-ups, directly looking at the results, direct dealings between countries were often bloody and direct. In reality, with Eliza's ability, she wouldn't be able to see through these twists and turns. It was just that the responsibility of replacing Roland was too heavy, and she had too many misgivings, so she couldn't make the decision to turn against Roland. Now that there was Roland's personal letter, she naturally wouldn't hesitate anymore. Let's say that our air knight is also sick. He caught a cold and has a fever of 40 degrees, how can he fight in the sky? What? Undead don't have fever? Then let's say that he has diarrhea. Yes, I am clearly playing them, not giving them any face. If they are not happy, then first ask them how Elson got sick. If it still doesn't make sense, then let Tymir meet that Griffin Knight, and see if he has recovered from his illness. And when Eliza made up her mind not to compromise, and directly gave the other party attitude, she also felt a little more relaxed. And just when she was about to pour herself a cup of black tea to rest, and then deal with those annoying official matters, a reckless figure barged in. Not good, the latest news. The Anzolo Empire suddenly changed sides and attacked our camp. Our army was defeated. The 7 northern countries suddenly became the 6 northern countries. No matter how good Eliza's self-cultivation was, she still spat out the black tea in her mouth. At this time, she finally understood what Roland meant. Every holy war is the time when countries and major forces stand on the same side. The position of both sides is not stable, and it is not surprising who betrays. We should also preserve our strength first. In the Aurora's hangar, dozens of engineers were busy, and the team of teenagers, Cohen and Timlad, had mysteriously become the leaders of the research team. Why does His Highness still not allow us to use it on the battlefield? If it can be used in theory, our situation should be much better, and we can also teach those northerners a lesson. The wisdom of mortals. Ever since he came into contact with His Highness Roland, Timlad fell in love with those pretentious lines. Now, as long as someone asked him what he did not understand, he would definitely push down his glasses, flat, and then talk about stupid humans, the wisdom of mortals, even monkeys are smarter than you. Whether or not he showed that he was very knowledgeable, it was true that he made people want to beat him up. Many people in the Gentleman League had already beaten him up, but apparently little Timlad had forgotten. Is there any hidden meaning in these words? We are not gods, of course we are mortals. You still haven't told me why not use it on the battlefield. All right, in front of Cohen, who had a serious face, in front of him, and in front of him, even the usually lively Timlad had to restrain himself. My stupid little brother. It seemed that in a certain sense, his restraint was limited. I'm older than you. Also, I'm not related to you by blood. Cohen was obviously stubborn, and this was his personality. After receiving orders from Roland, he made Timlad work overtime every day. Finally, Timlad could not take it anymore. You blockhead, you have no sense of humor or the sales of an artist. Are you really a mage? You're just like those muscular knight guys. I'm not a mage to begin with. Do I really look like a knight? That's great. Hehe, I'm not as good as you say. Alright, next up was the time for little Timlad to go on a rampage. But even if he had 2 arms, he would definitely not be able to defeat Cohen. From a certain perspective, the young but stubbornly old-fashioned Cohen was basically Timlad's natural enemy. Alright, I'll tell you the truth. His Highness means that the guys down there are not reliable at all. These are all our backup plans, and we can't use them until the critical moment. What's the critical moment? That's a lot, but we won't use them until the critical moment. And as long as the higher-ups deem it necessary to use them, the green light above the hangar will turn red. Green light? I didn't see it. Am I really colorblind? Isn't it above us? That red light is. Wait, it's red. The battle has begun. Shiluor Swamp, Katia Wastelands, Baikal Highlands were once forbidden areas for the living, and also the territory of the Shiluor Empire. But now, it had turned into a battlefield. Countless undead were slaughtering each other, and the battlefield was filled with the roars of a formless black death god. The ground was filled with the smell of bones and rotting flesh. The undead of both sides were using actual combat to exchange their understanding of the art of death. The civil war in Shiluor had already lasted for several months. At this point, both sides had suffered heavy losses, and it was time for the war to end. And at this critical moment, more than 30 Air Knights suddenly arrived. They were draped in black cloaks, and their figures couldn't be seen clearly. But judging from the transparent white shadow mounts and the frightening power of death overflowing around them, it was obvious that they were extremely high-ranked Death Knight. And the moment they landed, a figure was already waiting for them. You're finally here. It's been a tough journey, but it's a pity that we don't have time to rest. Heh, is there a need for us to rest? Little Lionheart, we're here according to His Highness's instructions. Our plan can begin. Of course, it wouldn't be wrong to say that it's ending. The once great city of Antoon had already suffered the greatest calamity in its history. Not only did it lose a large portion of its walls, but its master had also lost the hearts of the people. In the long siege war, countless citizens and soldiers had sacrificed themselves without any complaints. But when the war caused a shortage of resources, Not only did the royal family not open the treasury to distribute food, but they even started to collect food from the citizens. This had already caused public outrage. Ever since the start of the war, King Fummel Casso had never appeared. In addition to that, before the beastmen invaded, it was said that Prince Roland had given a warning. Not only did Fummel not listen, he even slandered Roland for having ulterior motives. Now, the facts had proven this king's foolishness. His behavior of cowering in his own palace had also proven his cowardice. Coupled with his selfishness in collecting food, this king's reputation had become unbearable. In this dangerous world, the citizens had the duty to provide for the lord, but the lord also had the duty to protect the citizens. This was the most basic relationship of trust between the two. And when the lord wasn't willing to fulfill his most basic duty, how could he sit on his throne? Fummel isn't fit to be the king. There were already people shouting this slogan in the streets and alleys. And at this moment, the king had just executed a concubine who tried to persuade him to go up to the city walls to fight. He was shivering in his own palace. All of you want me to die. All of you want me to die. All of you are assassins sent by that Roland. All of you want to steal my throne. I won't let you get what you want. I must survive. At the same time, in a house in Antoun, two temporary stowaways were at a loss as to what to do. Marguerite, I want to kill this bastard. Must we protect him? If you're unhappy, then go ahead and mess with him. But don't kill him. Otherwise, this city will be finished. Protect Antoun. H. That fellow Roland really knows how to randomly assign tasks. Don't worry, he'll soon get his retribution. My instincts have always been accurate. Is it the commonly known as the Shura? Shura blade? Shura field. Heh, it's a strange term that Roland invented, but it always ends up being used on him. But this time, it probably won't happen. In front of Eliza, I feel that Renee isn't competitive at all. Your instincts must have guessed wrongly. Hehe, some of it isn't my instincts. The red-haired warrior shook the crumpled letter. It was a greeting from his hometown and a certain someone was coming to visit. You didn't tell Roland? Are you planning to trick him again? Hehe, I really forgot this time. It definitely wasn't on purpose. If you forget every time, then it must be on purpose. Very few people knew that the most secretive passage to the underground world in the north was actually in the Elven Kingdom. And at this moment, an adventuring party formed by two young girls was wandering in it. Anya, are you sure this is the right path? Why do I feel like we're going the wrong way again? Sister and, please believe me. I'm absolutely right. I swear in the name of my grandfather that my horseshoe is guiding me. This is the path in front of me. You said the same thing half a month ago. Why don't we find someone to ask? Can we find someone to ask? Hey, Sister Banshee over there, may I ask if the Elven territory is this way? You're my little apple. No matter how much I love you, it's never too much. Your little red face warms my heart and lights up the fire of my life. Fire, 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 fire. When there were so many things waiting for me to deal with, I was in the middle of the snowy mountain, beating the drums and singing. The reason? It was probably because of the people around me who were singing along. Fire, 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 fire. What is fire? Can it be eaten? Of course it can be eaten. Didn't you see that human crying while singing? He must be craving it. Alright, I want to try it too. There are only snow dregs in the snowy mountain. The ones speaking were snowmen, snow monsters, and snow ladies. On the day of the Winter Vale Festival, they organized a grand entertainment event. When they heard that I was the descendant of the legendary singer from 1,000 years ago, the Mist King, I was told that if I didn't perform well, I wouldn't be able to take away a single frigid maw. Yes, the legendary singer, the Mist King, relied on this to settle these frigid maw. At this moment, I wasn't crying because I was craving it. Humans don't have this ability. I was obviously going crazy from anxiety. One more. You sang so well, little apple. Great. Little apple must be the lover that you miss. Yeah, there are many cubs in the altar. You can take as many as you can sing. I finally understood why the Mist King never told anyone what he had encountered in the past. Even if the truth of history was always deceptive, to this extent, he was probably the only one. If it was me in the past, I definitely wouldn't say anything either. Wiping away my tears, the audience was so supportive, I could only continue. My musical talent was extremely limited. Most of the songs that I could remember were divine songs that were filled with demonic music. Betraying my love, forcing me to leave, when I finally found out the truth, my tears fell. 100 years later, there was a legend that when a mountain dweller got lost in the snowy mountains during the Winter Veil Festival, if he came back, he would become an idiot and then madly sing a demonic song that would drive people crazy. And those who heard this song would also become an idiot and only know how to sing along. The boundless horizon is my love, flowers are blooming at the foot of the rolling green mountains. Chapter 159. The mysteries of nature were endless. When the miracles of the Creator God combined with the power of nature, all kinds of incredible desolation, beautiful scenery, and wonders could exist. The Great Snowy Mountain of the North, officially known as the Frost-White Mountains of the Extreme North, also known as the Eternal Frozen Ice Prison. It bordered 3 of the 7 kingdoms of the North. In terms of land area, it was not inferior to a small kingdom. However, its residents were a little special, and the population could not be large. As the altitude increased, one could not see any place that was not covered by snow and ice. The endless snowy hills, the strange snow-carved rocks, the upside-down snow pillars, the silver trees, the towering ice towers, the small world under the elemental ice lake, the upside-down ice waterfall, and the strange monsters in the mountains, such as the ice phoenix and the silver unicorn. Due to the unparalleled beauty of the snowy mountains, it was known as the most beautiful forbidden area for life in the world. Yes, it was also a forbidden area for life. It was also one of the coldest places in the world, with an average temperature of about -50 degrees. Except for a few special days every year, the mountains were sealed off by heavy snow. It was definitely a desolate place where no ordinary creature could survive. Some people even treated this place as a separate ice plain. From the mag's research, this area indeed had obvious characteristics of a different world. The ice elemental crystals that spread everywhere, other elemental planes also had their own ice elemental crystals, were the best evidence. If the ice elemental god were to be born one day, this place would definitely be the most important candidate for him. But it would be wrong to think that this place was quiet because there were no ordinary creatures. When ordinary creatures could not enjoy the extreme cold, this place was a paradise for elemental creatures, soul creatures, and top-level monsters. After walking along the mountains for a long time, they found that there were giant ice dragons that walked on other people's bodies, elemental wild boars that could shake mountains just by walking, and super ice phoenixes that could cause blizzards just by flying. This uninhabited area was also their home. Many of them were even in the same period as Ale, and their strength and heritage were unfathomable. However, they had always lived here, even when the era changed, even when the world was about to be destroyed, they had no intention of leaving. Have you heard? 2 days ago, the Ice Pig King in Shanbei gave birth to a group of cubs. Among them was a super-mutated winged pig king that will enter the epic rank sooner or later. Ah, Big White is so lucky. Then I'll have to prepare a congratulatory gift. How about we go to the Ice Element Lake and ask for an ice crystal blessing from the old Dragon King? The relatively isolated environment allowed time to flow very quickly here. This land of ice and snow was far more peaceful than the outside world. These existences that had known each other for hundreds of years had direct interactions with each other, and they were essentially no different from the aunties next door. Perhaps it was the nature of ice and snow demons to prefer silence. This place was always so peaceful, but recently, it was a little different. They had a new hot topic. Have you heard? There's a super singer from Frigid Moor's side. He was the MC and singer for Pig King's birthday celebration. He sang really well. Is it that song, Happy Birthday to You, Pig, Happy Birthday to You, Pig, Pig Head, Pig Brain, Pig Body, Pig Tail, never picky with food, sleeps until 3 poles under the sun every day, never brushes his teeth, never fights. Oh, I heard Ad, Snowman, and Little Me, Ice Unicorn, sing it before. So it came from there. It's really not bad. Not only does it sound nice, but it also fits the occasion. Yeah, now everyone calls her our Ballad of Snow. Those brats surround her every day. They all listen to her sing new songs every day. It's her. Why did I hear that she's a boy? I saw her once. Although I'm not too sure about the gender of the little meaty person, how could she be a boy when she's so cute? Or maybe she's just like us and has no gender. Who knows? But I heard that Frigid Moor's been having a lot of fun lately. That's right, only their soul contract can allow outsiders to enter this place. This seems to be the first time in more than 300 years. Yeah, I see them singing and dancing in the square at the entrance of the canyon every day. That little apple? I went there once. Those Frigid Moors were dancing and transforming at the same time. In the end, it was truly a dance of demons. At this moment, in the canyon, the sky was still bright. The singing and dancing sounds that gave me such a headache once again appeared in the square. The endless green mountains are my love. You betrayed my love and forced me to leave. You're always too soft-hearted, too soft-hearted. You're my little apple, little apple, little apple. Ha! Little apple, your sister. You're still playing this game? Have you had enough? Unfortunately, this ice cave didn't even have a window, not to mention a door. I had to brace myself and enjoy this unbearable demonic music. Even though I received praise from the Frigid Moors group, I deeply regretted my performance at that time, especially after many things were revealed. One song for one Frigid Moor? Oh, that was just a joke. No matter how unreliable we are, we wouldn't make a deal with our own kind. At that time, my mood. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't defeat them, I would have thrown this lion-shaped Frigid Moor before me into a gnome cannon and shot it out. Perhaps I would have even tried burning the lion's head. I didn't care if he was an ancient existence or not, nor did I care if he was a companion of my ancestor. A lion's head should eat something sweet. Something seemed slightly wrong. Even though I had so many things to do, it wasn't easy for me to come here to fulfill my end of the bargain. I just had to be fooled by these Frigid Moors group. I really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How can you use a false mask here? You should face everyone with your real face. Alright, this lion's words were indeed logical. If I ended up angering a powerful existence because of this, it wouldn't be worth it. Of course, my immature appearance and my neutral voice, which hadn't reached puberty yet, caused some trouble as well. Ballad of Snow? What was that? I didn't know. Fine, I admit that it was all that talkative Irene Baylor's fault. But let's just let this dark history be hidden in history. As long as I left this mountain, I would fight to the death against anyone who dared to mention that name. Still, from a certain standpoint, it was inevitable that things would end up like this. Frigid Moor was a unique type of soul creature. They were the embodiment of ice and snow. Just like the molten fire tribe, who devoured lava to grow, Frigid Moor could also devour ice energy and gems to grow. However, they didn't have the appetite and lust that living creatures with flesh and blood possessed. They were also unable to understand the actions that living creatures with flesh and blood did due to their desires. But even such illusory and proper existences still had their own hobbies. Since they weren't able to enjoy the flesh, then the enjoyment of the spirit was naturally more to the appetite of these soul creatures. They couldn't create music, painting, poetry, and other arts related to the humanities themselves, but they instinctively desired the brilliance of the intelligent races in the outside world. To them, this was the nourishment and luxury that they needed to grow. The Frigid Moor didn't hide their hobbies. According to them, the ancestors of the Mist Kingdom who had taken away their cubs in previous years also spent a lot of time preparing their next gifts and performances. This was the reason why the Frigid Moor, who originally didn't have any tradition of the Winter Veil Festival, gradually got used to the Winter Veil Festival. On that day, a contestant from afar would come to visit. He would perform a performance that he had meticulously prepared. Perhaps it wasn't that precious, but it was indeed the work of craftsmen and painters. On the other hand, the mature Frigid Moor in the outside world who were looking forward to their return would excitedly talk about their past experiences. In the end, when the festival ended, the mature Frigid Moor would watch him leave with his newborn cubs and eggs, just like a young parent watching their child go to primary school for the first time. For thousands of years, the The Winter Veil Festival was the day that the entire race looked forward to the most. In a sense, the Mist royal family had already missed their promise for almost 400 years. It was also because of this that I patiently sang with them. To be honest, my singing was very average. Although my voice wasn't bad, there were quite a number of people who forgot the lyrics halfway through the song. There were even more cases of people singing out of tune. As a result of the natural poor rhythm of music, the phenomenon of stringing together words, missing words, and having too many words would happen from time to time. Every time those snow maidens who were good at singing and dancing would sing out of tune better than the original, but still not in tune, my old face would blush a little. However, the reason why the frigid Moor liked it was because of the musical melody contained in these divine songs, as well as the unique culture and ideology. They were definitely not products of this world. That fresh and profound art from another world attracted them instead. But every time, I would count the days with my fingers. After all, I didn't have much time left. It wasn't a good idea to continue wasting time like this. Aroyne, you are the companion of the Mist King and also my elder. Then, you should have been outside. The current situation in the Mist Kingdom isn't good. I really need to go back. However, every time I said this sentence, the ice crystal lion head would smile foolishly and then find some random things for me to do. For example, the ice wild boar in the mountains had given birth to a little cub and asked me to help them sing a song to celebrate it. The Ice Phoenix family's ancestor was celebrating her 40,000th birthday and needed me to help her celebrate it. I definitely can't wait. If it still doesn't work, I can only go back first and come back next year. Finally, this time, I blocked Aroyne's main entrance. Seeing how anxious I was to leave at any moment, he finally didn't try to fool me anymore. I know, we also have news from the outside world. I also know that you're here in search of power. As your elder, I won't stop you. But look at yourself now. Can you really obtain power? Me? I'm fine. An indescribable sense of irritation made me reply without even thinking. However, the old lion revealed an abnormally human-like smile. Is it? You're also a user of the power of ice. We, Frigid Moor, are also beings of the power of ice. But you've seen that Frigid Moor act in such a hurry. That's because it's too peaceful here. I got bored. A retort was already at the tip of my tongue. But just as I was about to say it, I suddenly thought of something and paused. Every element has its own nature and characteristics. Fallen magic and holy light will affect the personality and mind of the user. Elemental magic is no exception. It's just that if one's training progresses slowly, it can be controlled. Due to being corroded by the elemental power that one is proficient in, most fire mags are hot-tempered, earth mags are sturdy and steady, water mags are easygoing and calm, wind mags are ever-changing and eloquent, and ice mags, which are advanced from water mags, are famous for being cold-blooded creatures. Most of them are abnormally calm. The so-called affinity for the elements is just the degree to which you resonate with the elements. To put it bluntly, it's the degree to which the elements like you. Magic is the miraculous power produced by a strong will. Will comes from the soul, and all miraculous powers originate from the source of the soul. The so-called incantations, casting gestures, and materials are only supplementary. In the end, it still belongs to the soul. Perhaps, many years ago, you were blinded by hatred and couldn't see clearly. After so many years, when you understand your own path, why didn't you open your heart to the elements? You closed your eyes and ears and erected barriers in your soul. How could you obtain the love and intimacy of the ice and snow elements? Since you're here in pursuit of power, the ice and snow elements are the most trustworthy power. Those elemental spirits clearly love your singing, so why didn't you allow them to enter your soul? Child, you're still too impatient. Since this is a rare opportunity, you should look around more. Perhaps the entire world will be different. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I broke out in a cold sweat. All miraculous powers originate from the soul? Damn it, I actually forgot about this. So, I've been making mistakes all this time. What astonished me the most was that on the path of pursuing power, I had unknowingly forgotten the most important foundation. My power of law was my desire for fairness, while the god of holy light's holy light was his obsession with the natural laws of the world. Powerful cultivators would often use their souls to match the nature of their power. If one only used power to control power, then they would have long since become inferior and would never be able to reach the true peak. Outside the window, there was a boundless snow's cape. It was the white that spread across the horizon. It was the home of the ice and snow spirits. Even though I was in this country of ice and snow, my heart was still in the bustling mortal world. Do you think that the soul contract with frigid Moor is all there is to the Aurora Night? No, the way you use it is so crude that even we can't bear to look at it. It's like using a god equipment to trim your nails. You're simply wasting your and Irene Baylor's potential. Also, that magic sword system of yours, you guys have too little openness to it. Your understanding and usage of the elements are even more of a mess. You're basically using a golden plate to beg for food. In order to prevent the Winter Veil Festival from becoming cold again, when your heart has calmed down, let us old fellows teach you about the understanding of ice and snow. Elemental God. Hehe, in front of some of us ancient existences, they're still just juniors. Perhaps I'm not the strongest in my tribe, but I can still talk to you about the understanding of ice and snow that the Mist King had back then. If my partner was still here, these juniors wouldn't be so arrogant. Chapter 160. No one would have expected that in this epic war known as the Shameless Betrayal War, the first to launch a surprise attack would be the allied forces of the four northern kingdom of the elves. Yes, the first to break the stalemate was not the orcs who launched a surprise attack, nor the humans who were defending their homeland, but the elves who were eager to show their stance to a certain existence. At 6 in the morning, the unannounced crossbow bolts and magic sent the elves greetings. The human allied forces sent out their main force to meet the enemy. The allied forces of the Seven Kingdoms, excluding Donglan and San Antonio, had a combined force of more than 500,000, and more than 400,000 of them were engaged in battle. The elves had a total force of 167,000. To the super empires, they were probably the garrison of a large city, but their strength was not to be underestimated. The superior elves were a silver race, and even the weakest of them would have silver-tier combat power when they reached adulthood. The inferior elves, equipped with luxurious equipment unique to the elves, could easily reach the silver tier of the humans. In addition to the elves' excellent magic craftsmanship and the ratio of mags, their strength should not be underestimated. We thought it would be an ordinary war drill, but no one expected that the Long Ears would disregard our past and use strategic magic to clear the ground. Our men were heavily injured, and they even used enchanted crossbows and elven ancient trees. They are for real. Perhaps this officer who had almost all of his subordinates could explain why they were defeated so badly. Rather than saying that they did not expect it, it would be more accurate to say that the arrogant humans had underestimated the determination of the elves from the start. The elves who had accumulated resentment for many years came with the intention of a final battle from the very beginning. As the rulers, since the elf kings had made their choice, they naturally knew that there was no turning back for them. On the other hand, the proud Antonio people seemed to treat this as another stupid border conflict. When the elves launched their surprise attack, they were actually waiting for the results of the church and political diplomacy. The war plan made by the GHQ did not even include a plan to deal with the elves' attack. As for the other northern countries, they thought that since San Antonio was here, there would be someone who would be able to hold the fort even if the sky collapsed. However, they didn't think too much about it. When disaster befell them, the first to suffer was usually the weakest who ran the slowest. Therefore, when the two sides clashed, their understanding and attitude towards war caused the human allied forces to fall into a disadvantageous position. The towering ancient war tree charged at the Knight Squadron, its gigantic roots sending several unlucky knights flying every time it attacked. The humans' lances weren't very effective against this kind of creature, and when the knights used the encircling dragnet tactic to deal with the giants, the ancient war tree suddenly took root and transformed into a towering tree that covered the sky, causing the knights to be even more at a loss. On the other hand, the Griffin Knight was challenged by the Hippogriffin archers. These powerful flying lions had finally met their natural enemy. The elf archers who never missed their target were skilled in mounted archery. It was not difficult for them to shoot through the gaps in the thick helmet of the Griffin Knight. On the other hand, even though the Griffin Knight had the upper hand in close combat, the Griffin Knight that had been studied thoroughly by the other party was unable to pull the battle to a distance that was most suitable for them. They were often shot down in the continuous pursuit and counter-pursuit. And when the battle reached a stalemate, the accurate and vicious magic support of the elves became a heavy hammer that broke the balance of the battlefield. Mags needed time and the accumulation of knowledge, and the long-lived species had a unique advantage in this aspect. When faced with the elves that had come out in full force, most of the spells of the human mags were suppressed. The magic power of both sides was not on the same level at all. The human priests and holy knight might have been the highlight of the chaotic battle, but they lacked powerful offensive spells, so they were not of much use. The elves, who had always been allies, were probably the opponents that the humans lacked the most experience in battle and had no way to deal with them. And the elves of the northern lands had always treated the humans as their imaginary enemy. And when the first wave of battle reached a stalemate, the second sharp blade of the orcs was still not wielded by themselves. The army of the Anzolo Empire, who was the arrowhead of the army's right flank, changed their direction and ruthlessly slashed at their allies. San Antonio, who was in the middle of the army, did not expect that their right flank would suddenly change sides. The assassins who had been prepared for this moment exploded at the same time and were assassinated by their allies in the chaos of the battlefield. The commander of San Antonio, Alan Rem, who was ranked 98th in the list of famous generals, was assassinated, and the entire battlefield fell into a stalemate. And when the news of the commander being assassinated spread, the allied armies of the various countries started to waver. At this critical moment, the orc army began to move. When the gigantic behemoth, carrying the shaman priests who were beating the war drums, entered the battlefield, the defeat of the humans was already set in stone. The orcs, who were good at killing, gave the humans a good lesson. What it meant to crush a single soldier, and what it meant to run with the beasts. 2 human warriors can deal with 1 orc? When the orcs put on the earth elemental protection armor and were sent into a berserk state by the shaman's war song, a normal orc veteran could turn into a war-killing machine. A standard team, 12 people, might not even be able to kill an elite orc with double the attack and defense. In this battle, with the cooperation of the 3 parties, the trap set by the Chaos side finally began to close. The humans suffered a crushing defeat and lost the first battle. Out of the 400,000 soldiers who went out to fight, less than half of them returned to Red Maple City alive, and most of them were injured. The allied armies of the humans had to change their strategy from offense to defense. And when Eliza heard the news, she was also very surprised. A human country actually betrayed the entire human world? Do they not intend to continue living? In a sense, the Anzolo Empire is quite similar to the Mist Kingdom of the past. They probably suffered enough. But the fuse of this direct outbreak should be those bastards from San Antonio who used them as cannon fodder. Yeah, that's too much. I'm starting to sympathize with Anzolo. Our small country is weak, and this time, Anzolo has already taken out his coffin. If he fought to the end, there's nothing to say. But sacrificing them as cannon fodder is too much. No wonder they chose such an extreme way to deal with it. As expected, soon, a strongly worded declaration of war was announced. In the declaration, as the declaring country, the Anzolo Empire angrily rebuked San Antonio as the leader for using the military forces of other countries as cannon fodder. They also locked the declaration of war on San Antonio, expressing that they had no intention of betraying the Order side and the mainstream human society. Of course, no matter what they said, those who should be believed would still be believed, and those who shouldn't be believed would have no meaning to say anything. Actual actions were the most direct expression. That sounds nice, but why are there orcs and elves mixed together? Following the betrayal of the Anzolo Empire, the current Red Maple City had fallen into chaos. There were assassins who took advantage of the chaos to clean up the remaining forces and spies, as well as assassins who took advantage of the chaos to carry out assassinations. There were even mid to high-level combatants who directly ambushed the important people in the city. The original city lord also died in the battlefield, and before a sudden political storm was about to arrive, a merchant group called Schindler stood up and became the new leader of the city. They were mainly formed by the locals, and their slogan was "Use your own hands to find the good life of the past." They weren't soldiers, and were meaningless to the armies of the outside world. The direction of their efforts was very simple, and that was to strike down those lawless thugs, so that the city could still maintain order and vitality. However, very few people knew that the merchant group, which had a background of slave trading, was only an organization used to allow the civilian orcs to survive, and that their leader was a foreigner. The Allied army is in chaos, all the official institutions in the city are paralyzed, and their functions have stopped. The funds of the merchant group on the surface are almost depleted, and they really can't hold on any longer. Roland, hurry back. Boo-hoo-hoo, it's so pitiful to have such cruel parents. Don't worry, Anya will help you. As long as he dares to appear in front of you, Anya will help to kick him away, all 4 of my hooves at once. Oh, I still need a fulcrum, so let's make it 3. In the forest where the exit of the underground city was located, beside a bonfire, girls from 3 different races were chatting happily. Aren't you afraid of me? I'm a banshee. Facing the doubt of the pale white shadow, and Anya looked at each other, then covered their mouths and laughed. The person that sister and likes is a Lich. He probably isn't a Lich anymore. However, we aren't prejudiced against the undead. Besides, sister seems to be a natural undead, and that can only be converted by an extremely special person. They are either extremely kind or extremely resentful, so why would I be afraid of them? That's right, Your Highness Swana, why don't you come with us? We are going to a country that isn't prejudiced against the undead. Perhaps, you can find the answer to peace that you have been searching for your entire life there. Chapter 161. Becoming an undead is easy. Any necromancer can awaken the undead, soul summoning. If one wishes to maintain their rationality, it is also possible to do so. Low-tier undead have no intelligence. However, if a legend rank sword saint or archmage chooses to become an undead, as long as their body and soul are intact, it would be difficult for them to fall below silver rank. After soul summoning was popularized, the simplest path to immortality appeared. Experts who have reached a certain level can find an undead master and sign a secret agreement before their lifespan ends. Thus, faced with the temptation of immortality, countless black-cloaked swordsmen and grey-robed mags would secretly come to the Shiluor Empire every year. Among them, there are quite a few famous names in the various countries. Newly born undead lords who are originally unknown but appear to be rather powerful appear every year. Even as a semigod undead emperor, even when faced with the best materials, it is impossible for me to guarantee success in every undead transformation. However, the method to increase the success rate of undead transformation is not a secret. Soul. All power originates from the soul. This is the most basic law of this world. The core to increase the success rate of undead transformation is also on the soul. The transformation of life and death sounds fantastical and magical. However, in my eyes, it is completely explainable with logic and knowledge. The living is a physical body and a soul. Actually, the undead are made of the same composition. It is just that the soul and physical body might not be the original. For example, if a complete body is seen as a personal computer, the living would be an original product produced by a factory. Their software, soul, and hardware, physical body, are perfectly compatible. Furthermore, they are equipped with an automatic upgrade function, life growth. For the undead who are revived, the software might not change, but the original hardware is definitely unusable. The new physical body is a compatible machine that is pieced together. Perhaps its performance will be very strong, but system conflicts and inexplicable crashes are all very common. In that case, the reason for the failure of undead transformation is obvious. Either the hardware and software are incompatible, or the software, soul, is missing data. If it was the former, they could just modify the physical body, but if it was the latter, there was basically no way to save it. After all, no matter how good a computer was, it was impossible for it to read a disk with a missing piece. No matter how valuable the data contained in the disk, no matter how passionate and unrestrained the performance of the artist was. It was just a metaphor, so don't get the wrong idea. Of course, necromancers could also use other souls to make up for it, but it was needless to say whether it would still be the original person. Furthermore, there were more problems with such a soul. The current technology was unable to preserve the soul's activity and memory for a long time. There was a 90% chance that the soul would become mentally retarded after piecing it together. Therefore, the most fundamental and important factor to successfully transform into an undead was obvious: preserving the soul. This was also the reason why undead were usually souls with deep resentment. Resentment, unfulfilled regrets, was doubtlessly the reason why souls didn't dissipate. A firm will and pure personality would make the soul more solid, which could increase the success rate of conversion. Then, the conclusion was out. Based on my research theory that contradicted the current mainstream thinking, the success rate of soul conversion had nothing to do with the soul's strength when it was alive. It was just that the will of a powerful fighter who had experienced hundreds of battles wouldn't be weak, so naturally, the success rate would be higher. It was impossible for there to be no losses in death. It would already be good if the deceased could preserve more than 80% of their memories. If I were to use a disk as an analogy, it would mean that they had lost at least 20% of their data, and 20% of the disk, soul, would be unusable. At this point, the difference between a naturally awakened undead and an undead awakened by a soul summoning spell was also out. In reality, their principles were the same. It was just that a naturally awakened soul's will was especially firm, their personality was so pure that there were no impurities. Their resentment before death was enough to cause snow in June. Even after death, their souls refused to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Their souls didn't dissipate in the slightest. Without the guidance of a necromancer, they automatically achieved the transition between life and death. This was also the reason why natural undead had such astonishing potential. Their souls didn't dissipate in the slightest and were basically the same as when they were alive. On the contrary, after passing through the boundary between life and death, they came into contact with the secrets of their own souls and were able to gain a deeper understanding of the essence of power. When a normal undead lost a portion of their soul, their growth rate would naturally become very low. However, my 7 deadly sins were an exception. They didn't start off strong, but their growth rate was very high. Compared to normal necromancers who focused on the creation of powerful undead bodies, hardware engineers, I set my sights on the source of the soul, software engineers. Of course, this was also due to the fact that I was a natural undead and had soaked in the river Styx several times. Even if other necromancers wanted to work on souls, they probably wouldn't know how to start. Their standard was still stuck at the level of transferring souls according to the instructions. Creating and piecing together new souls and the like, in their eyes, should be the authority of the Creator God. However, the number of souls that I had created and modified were not few. There were stubborn and twisted souls, perfectly reborn souls that were instinctively talented, loyal and unyielding souls, and many of them were even souls that I had created from other souls as raw materials. In a sense, it wasn't wrong for Omar and Dang to call me father. Complete and stubborn souls, this was also the inconceivably powerful foundation of the 7 deadly sins. As the crystallization of my research, their souls were all complete. Coupled with the specially prepared physical bodies for them, they were even more complete and stubborn than a normal living person. In a sense, they were artificial natural undead. But in reality, due to my ability, compared to real natural undead, their potential was still a notch lower. After all, the natural undead that I knew were all supermonsters, including myself, Heloise, and Ale. Didn't they say that in ancient times, there was a Valkyrie who guided Valkyrie to the Valkyrie Palace? To be honest, there wasn't much difference between them and necromancers. As for the Valkyrie under the gods in modern times, there wasn't much difference between them and artificial undead. It was just that the one who summoned the souls was a god. Under the influence of God's power, they were able to retain more of their memories and battle techniques. Everything originated from the soul. Valkyrie's soul was basically solidified to its strongest state. It seemed great, but in reality, Valkyrie was basically unable to progress any further because of this. It was the same for the undead. In a sense, putting aside that dazzling halo, Valkyrie and the undead had too many similarities, and couldn't be compared to the natural undead. In ancient times, there were still some natural undead, but in modern times, the rate of natural undead awakening was completely negligible. The fragile souls of modern people were unable to resist the attraction of reincarnation, not to mention the complete awakening of a soul. Furthermore, just having this wasn't enough. The most difficult condition to achieve was the resentment and unwillingness to destroy the world. Both Heloise and I had our countries destroyed, and we were the last descendants of the royal family who watched our own people and kingdom fall into ruin. It could be said that we were vengeful spirits who stayed in this world for the sake of revenge. Ale didn't say what happened to him, but it probably wasn't anything good. Even if all the conditions were met, sufficient luck was still needed, and the success rate had to be calculated from the decimal point. Thus, for the current people, the undead were equivalent to the undead summoned by necromancers. The natural undead were not an option from the very start, and some necromancers themselves didn't even know that there was such a thing as the natural undead. Thus, when Swana revived as a banshee, no one knew about it, and no one could predict it. Perhaps even the elven gods who planned everything didn't expect such a small probability of happening. Pure souls tended to transform into spiritual undead, and female elves were one of the races most likely to become banshees. After Swana revived as a banshee, the title of Queen of Banshees would no longer be exclusive to Heloise. From a certain standpoint, there were many similarities between Heloise and Swana. They were both born as elven princesses, and they both suffered the betrayal of their most trusted people and gods. Their deaths were both important historical events, the living sacrifices of war. The ironic thing is that the elven gods who were at the height of their power back then created a godly enemy like Heloise, and the undead would definitely have sufficient time to investigate the truth. When everything is exposed to the light of day, Swana might also become a godly enemy. However, digging a hole and jumping into it is a tradition of the elves and the elven gods. The Golden Elves and Roseback then are the most classic examples. They were the fuse that led to the fall of the elves. This time, if the elven gods were to turn into the malevolent gods of chaos, I am looking forward to seeing what Rose, who is famous for her extreme hatred towards Aishi, would do. Back to the main topic, even if the humans had already started to pull back their defenses, and Red Maple City, as the core area, was heavily guarded, it still couldn't stop a legend rank warrior, a golden archer, and a natural undead banshee from surrounding us. Ah! Uncle Bones isn't here. Big sister Eliza, how did you return? And sighed in disappointment, not only because of the fact that Roland wasn't here, but also because of the disappointment of Eliza's return. This naturally made Eliza's eyebrows twitch. What does she mean by asking about my boyfriend the moment they meet? Also, we only fought once before, is it that indifferent now? I thought you would ask about Adam and the others first. They came here a few days ago. I know about foster father and big sister Marguerite, I have been communicating with them. Right, didn't foster father tell you that I'm coming? Adam, as always, he's a bastard. In an instant, the image of that man giving a thumbs up as usual appeared in Eliza's mind, revealing a smile as if he was watching a show. This is what I should do, don't thank me. All right, of course we welcome you. But as you can see, we are very busy now, so we don't have time to entertain you. If we have offended you, please forgive us. Eliza said so on the surface, but her lips purposely softly grumbled. An underground autarch and an underground beastman sovereign, how did they escape just like that? They are already adults, yet they run away as they please. Don't they know the severity of the situation? Obviously, judging from past experience, Eliza thought that these two fellows weren't here for proper business. They were most likely annoyed by work, so they abandoned their entourage and ran away from home. However, she didn't see the expected awkward expression. On the contrary, and smiled proudly. We are here for proper business. Right, do you still remember the declaration of underground dwellers should also enjoy sunlight? We are here for this. Is there going to be a war? This was Eliza's first reaction when she heard this. This demand for the right to enjoy sunlight, wasn't this the invasion of the underground allied forces that Roland had predicted? Considering the current situation of Donglan where Roland was, it was impossible for them to withstand a war on two fronts. Instantly, Eliza's expression turned ugly. But fortunately, Anya interrupted in time, preventing the atmosphere from worsening. Most of the Beastman chieftains requested to form an allied army to attack, but we are considering the possibility of renting a land. Renting a land? Buying, renting, or even an ownerless land is fine. This is also Prince Roland's intention. The most important part is to organize a scouting party to contact possible sellers, and we are the vanguard of the scouting party. Perhaps this was indeed a possibility. Nodding her head, Eliza didn't say anything else. On the other hand, the banshee who had been very reserved when she entered finally broke her silence. Roland. May I ask if you are talking about the legend Holy Knight Prince Roland? You are. Initially, Eliza thought that the other party was a banshee from Sulphur Mountain City, but from the looks of it, a banshee was a high-tier undead, and it was rare to meet one in the wild. Could this be a special envoy from Shiluor? I am Swana New Leaf. This name was in the headlines recently, perhaps even the Fuse of War. Of course, Eliza knew of it. She was shocked at first, but then, she seemed to have thought of something and nodded her head with a smile. This is really interesting. Perhaps that sly Roland would be happy to see your arrival. Oh, how rude of me. I have yet to answer your Highness' question. Yes, we are talking about Roland, the Holy Knight Roland from 300 years ago. Please don't call me princess. The current me is no longer a member of the royal family of the Tassel Kingdom, much less some elf princess. Looking at the dejected Swana, Eliza still wanted to say something, but the servant outside the door suddenly barged in, his face agitated. Obviously, he had important news to report. Lord Eliza, our reinforcements have finally arrived. Chapter 162. In the depths of the snowy mountains, it was a rare sunny day. The sunlight reflected off the snowy ground, creating a vast expanse of whiteness, dazzling one's eyes. Childhood is the most memorable memory. Children's duty is to play and grow well. Through games, they can train their future life skills. This is the instinct of life, and it is the path that children of different races must take. At this moment, in the snowy ground, the children of the snow country are playing and playing. Ah, little Snow. Don't run. Only an idiot wouldn't run. Quickly chase after me. Stop running, I can't run anymore. Waraha, little Rolo has no stamina, his legs are short, he runs slowly, he is a useless ghost, useless ghost. It seems that this is a group of innocent and lively children playing hide and seek, and the one who is the ghost is unable to run anymore. As for those children who were still full of energy, they circled around him, and when he used the last of his strength to chase after them again, they suddenly scattered in an uproar. It is no wonder that he is unable to catch up. Although they are all children, can the stamina of a snowman child and an ice unicorn child be the same? There are also young snow dragons and snow phoenixes. They can fly. Looking at his little friends running further and further away, the little ghost laughs loudly. He has already chased for the entire morning, and is currently tired and hungry. Ha 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 ha, this is so fun, my tears are coming out. Brats, continue running, the ghosts are coming to catch you. The eternal ice eon brings about eternal destruction, the eternal night has already descended, the ice eon will finally arrive. The destructive incantation brings about an extremely frightening magical ripple, and a blizzard arrives as scheduled. The ghost who is laughing hysterically starts to prepare a forbidden spell that destroys everything, but its target is a group of brats that he can't catch up to no matter how hard he tries. There are two types of brats, those that can move and those that can't move. Only the brats that can't move are good children. Soon, all the brats will become immobile. This is great, personality modification kick. As the huge ice crystal fist suddenly descends, the ice eon forbidden spell is interrupted by the lion head that suddenly flies out. Even though he is clearly sent flying, the ghost is still able to leave behind a final retort. What kick? That's a fist. Could it be that all four of your claws are feet? Do you eat with your feet? Well, I admit, the unfortunate person who was forced to become a ghost was me, and for the past 3 days, I have been doing what I hate the most in my life, playing with naughty children. How old are you? Still bickering with a child. To think you said you wanted to inherit Rivendate's will. How many days has it been? The mist descendants are becoming more and more useless. I can't take it anymore. I've been playing with those brats for 2 days. I'm going crazy. Calm down. My heart is about to burst. Are you sure it will help me? I only feel more anxious. It was a mistake to listen to this lionhead's nonsense. Playing with a child with a smile could calm one's mind. Perhaps this would be the case for other people, but for me, this was simply the torment of purgatory. It was simply too unpleasant. 3 days. Oh, let's move on to the next stage. The lion shook its head and made a new decision. Gui Ming. Are you sure you aren't fooling me? Why do I feel that it's so casual? This gigantic ice crystal lion had a rather Eastern name. This strange naming method seemed to be the hobby of the first Mist King. Yuen, actually, playing with children to calm down was just fooling you. The real goal was to be stained with the aura of the infant ice beast, which was already achieved yesterday. Alright, just hearing that it was fooling me made my anger rise. Then why didn't you inform me? Do you know how uncomfortable it is to pretend to push snowmen, have snowball fights, and play hide and seek? Especially when these brats are so unreasonable. They play with any danger and won't listen to me no matter what I say. They even treat me as a friend. I can't wait to throw these brats into a cannon and shoot them out. Ah! Everyone thought that you were having fun with them. After all, you are much younger than them. Their parents were also happy to have a playmate from outside. Seeing that you were having so much fun, they allowed them to play with you for another day. Why did you pull out your sword? Why did you chant an incantation? At this moment, in my mind, there was only I allowed them to play with you for another day because I was having fun echoing in my head. As expected, every brat has an unethical parent. Then, all of you shall turn into dregs. Eternal Glacier, listen to my rage. Aha! The Mist King's direct disciple, the personality-correcting fist that specializes in dealing with abnormal people. Ah! Reinforcements. This was completely out of Eliza's expectations. The news of the defeat had just spread, and San Antonio's reinforcements were still 1,000 miles away. The main forces of the 5 northern countries were already here. The second wave of mobilization wouldn't happen in a short period of time, so how could reinforcements arrive? The lords are waiting for your arrival. They hope that you can participate in the welcoming ceremony of the reinforcements. Hearing this, Eliza was even more shocked. Currently, Donglan wasn't in a good position among the allied armies. It was obvious that they were being marginalized. How could those arrogant generals of the large countries place her and the Mist Kingdom in their eyes? The generals have invited you over. It is said that this is the request of the reinforcements. They must see the representative of Donglan, otherwise, the reinforcements won't enter the city. Following which, more news arrived one after another. Only then did she understand what was going on. In that defeat, the general of San Antonio's army was said to be heavily injured. Thus, the Black Bear Ainro, who was also from San Antonio, took over the command. But even though they lost more than half of their army, San Antonio was still the largest faction in the Allied armies. Considering some special reasons, the Allied armies marginalized Donglan even more. And now, the newly arrived reinforcements obviously didn't give them any face and only acknowledged Donglan. Naturally, this made the generals of the Allied armies feel hurt. But since the reinforcements were sent to them, they didn't have the right to reject them. At the very least, they couldn't expose the disharmony between the Allied armies in front of the new reinforcements. Thus, they could only pretend to be powerful and quickly send Eliza to represent Donglan to make up the numbers. Where did the reinforcements come from? Donglan's army is already struggling to deal with the beast horde, and this reinforcements are giving me so much face. Could it be? She looked at the 2 people in the room suspiciously. From a certain standpoint, these 2 were super powerful figures. Of course, from their silly smiles, it was impossible to tell how respectable they were. It's not me. My accompanying army and the Dragon's Guard are still waiting in the tunnel. Without my orders, they won't come out. All right, accompanying army, guards of the dragons. From a certain standpoint, and was doing much better than her adopted father. With the support of the Dragon Queen, Ein Mezus, she was also a dragon princess. Coupled with the fact that the devils had retreated from the underground world, And Sulphur Mountain City had become the underground autarch that represented humanity, and was becoming more and more like the underground empress. Eliza's gaze turned to the other side. This centaur, who was previously the destroyer of kitchens and lightning rod of misfortune, was also smiling foolishly. Now, she was still the ruler of the underground beast men, one of the 4 underground autarchs. At least for now, she was still an equal existence to Anne. My ranger army and tribe warriors are also resting in the tunnel. With Big Sister Anne around, it will be very safe. I don't want to cause any trouble. I can't do anything with my army, right? Alright, even if she wasn't lying, she still spoke the truth. She also brought her army with her. When she said that she couldn't do anything with her army, it was probably because it was inconvenient for her to go shopping with too many people. For a moment, Eliza was speechless. What could she say? These two were truly the underground autarchs. Since they came to the surface, it would be inappropriate if they didn't bring a few armies with them. Aren't you afraid of causing trouble? The Underground Alliance army appeared on the surface and even appeared on the battlefield. If this was a conspiracy theory, it could be written into a few legendary novels. For example, the shocking conspiracy of the underground autarchs and beast men, 2 spies in the Holy War, the Dark Elves who try to build bridges. Yes, if Master was here, he would definitely comment on it. We didn't expect to encounter a war, so we left everyone in the tunnel. Now that the situation is so chaotic, it should be fine. Don't worry. As long as they don't exit the underground tunnel, no one will go there. That is the tomb of the elf royal family. Ordinary superior elves are unable to approach it. But in fact, it is a secret tunnel controlled by the royal family. This is also the reason why I stayed there to hide from my clansmen. Swanna's words made everyone heave a sigh of relief. But then, a new question arose. Since the reinforcements weren't from the Underground Alliance army, then who would it be? There are 2 batches of reinforcements, but they coincidentally met each other. The first batch is the allied forces of Chiral Autonomous Region and the Barbarian tribe. They are here to support Prince Roland. Hearing this, Eliza nodded. Roland did mention the secret agreement between the 3 territories, but he didn't have high hopes for them to send reinforcements. After all, the alliance was still in its probing phase. Many factors were unclear and Chiral itself was in a lot of trouble. The second batch of reinforcements is here to support Prince René. They are the Ottoman Empire. They said that His Majesty Dasos has sent reinforcements to thank His Highness for fulfilling the agreement regarding the key. Hearing this, Eliza couldn't help but smile. And burst into laughter. There were some things that even if Roland didn't say, he wouldn't be able to hide it from the resourceful Eliza. But Anne, who had always been underground, also knew about it. This was a little strange. Godfather mentioned it to me before. Is it that His Majesty who has bad eyesight for Uncle Bones? Looks like he's really devoted to Uncle Bones. But it's no wonder, Uncle Bones looks so cute when he's alive. When he was young, he really looked like a cute girl. I really want to hug him. Hearing this, while sighing that Adam was indeed Roland's #1 bad friend and was really up to no good, Eliza couldn't help but laugh. And, don't say this in front of Roland. Otherwise, he will really cry in front of you. If you force me again, I will really cry in front of you. Hatching eggs. Are you crazy or am I crazy? Don't judge me by my looks. You can only blame my mother for this. I am really a male. No, I am a male. Look at where you are going with me. I am a male, how can I possibly hatch eggs? My roar echoed in the cave, spreading far away. The reason? It was the new training plan that the lion head in front of me suggested. When it hatches, it will be the second step of your training. It is also for this goal that I want you to be tainted with the aura of a baby ice beast. It was a pitch-black ice crystal. Judging from the slight chill and the magic runes on the outer layer, it should be Frigid Moor's egg. But shouldn't Frigid Moor eggs be white? This is a dead egg, it hasn't hatched successfully. Logically speaking, it should be dead. But look at the magic runes and the ice crystal, you will know that it is still alive. Isn't this one of your tribesmen? Are you unable to hatch it yourself? 370 years ago, it almost hatched. After that, no matter what we did, it didn't react at all. Hearing that, I was stunned. At this point in time, it always reminds me of some bad things. Twins are the most mysterious existences in this world. They are divided into many types, and one of them is the rarest type, but they are the twins of twins. Their soul fluctuations are the same, as if they were originally one person, but their soul was torn into two parts. Enough. I first roared angrily, but then I was stunned. What was I angry about? What was it that made me so flustered? The lion head acted as though he didn't hear anything and continued to explain. The twins of misfortune? It should be the twins of fortune. They often have a unique way of working together and are the most compatible partners. Oh right, by the way, this egg is also Irene Bela's brother. Of course, it is possible that they are sisters. And it was also a descendant of the mist who sent it here. I don't think I need to say his name. At this moment, if I had a mirror, my expression would probably be very ugly. I have said what I need to say. The rest is up to you. Chapter 163. Woo woo woo. When the horn sounded in the cold wind, the citizens of this medium-sized city were at a loss. Although the news of the Alliance's defeat had spread, no one expected the beast men to come so quickly. They even chose to attack along the route of their march to remove this nail. A gigantic beast walked out from the shadows. It was a dragon-descendant battle turtle that was the size of a small mountain. It brought along seismic waves as it approached the city. There was even a grayish-white battle fortress on its gigantic shell. The sound of war drums and horns could be heard from within. The huge war turtle had a quarter of the blood of a giant dragon. Its huge body was no shorter than the city walls. It was the beastman's most terrifying siege weapon. Doomsday Turtle. The Bear King is here. It's his white-tailed bear army. There were not many dragon turtles in the world. In the north, there was only the Bear King's mount, Doomsday Turtle Blackback. It was the mount of the Bear King, Lund, and also his moving fortress. Behind him, the strangely silent behemoth could not be ignored. They walked out of the shadows one by one and turned into a real nightmare. From the start, the beast men sent out these terrifying behemoths. They probably wanted to end the battle quickly. Behemoth. Behemoth army. It's over, it's all over. Everyone, run. Although the siege dragon turtles were the biggest threat, the ones who brought the greatest fear were the seemingly docile behemoths. They did not look as strong as the dragon turtles. They were silent and did not even have the habit of roaring like wild beasts. They allowed their 3-meter-long sharp claws to directly leave a ditch on the ground. They marched forward in silence, just like soldiers marching in a procession. Ignoring their strong and deformed giant hands, they looked like standing gorillas with their thick fur. Under the thick fur, only 2 eyes were emitting a fierce light. Just by looking at their appearance, they were not as scary as the dragon turtles with their horns and fangs. On the contrary, they were charmingly naive. However, if one were to talk about their reputation, no one would ignore these terrifying big guys. Their silence was only to accumulate energy when they exploded. A real war beast did not have the habit of roaring. They would only show a satisfied smile when they enjoyed the flesh on their giant claws. The world's craziest beast, the #1 species in land battles. Although there were still a lot of unconvinced competitors for the first place in the land battle, the craziest beast was definitely worthy of its name. Just their appearance alone caused the people in the city to panic. Even though the so-called army only consisted of 3 behemoths, it was more than enough to sweep through the northern lands. Clang. Woo. The gigantic beast actually stepped on the back of the dragon turtle. With a forceful stomp, it used the reaction force to climb up the city wall. It was an ape that could easily climb up the treetops. The gigantic beast, which was not much shorter than the city wall, was actually as agile as a monkey. The ferocious beast easily leaped over the sturdy city wall. However, from the footprints left on the city wall, the sturdy 3-layered city wall was no different from a mud pile in front of the behemoth beast's enormous strength. When the gigantic beasts entered the city, they, who had been silent all this while, finally began to laugh sinisterly. Their twisted faces revealed monstrous teeth that were as tall as a human, sending chills down everyone's spines. blossoming in the middle and destroying the inside. Although it was simple, it was indeed effective. This was also the white-tailed army's specialty. They did not use the usual tactic of adding fuel to the fire. Instead, they forcefully broke through. Facing the vanguard of the behemoths, when the gate was opened by the gigantic beasts and the orc army entered the city, the difference in individual strength would naturally cause a crushing effect. Along the way, more than 10 cities had already been destroyed in such a way. When one of the golden-haired behemoths began to open the city gate from the inside, the other 2 silver-haired gigantic beasts began to destroy it. The trembling humans could not come up with any strong methods to stop the behemoths. Perhaps there were strong people in the city, but facing the desperate situation of the orc army, they would probably pretend that they were not there. The grinning orcs had already seen the future. Just like other cities, wherever the terrifying war beasts went, the humans screamed and fled in all directions. When the powerful orc army entered the city. However, this time, it was a little different. There were still people who did not intend to leave. A veteran stood at the city gate. His rusty chainmail was still full of stains. His rosacea was frozen red in the cold wind. The veteran did not madly charge towards the gigantic beasts, nor did he try to stop them. He just stayed where he was. In the midst of the chaos, he was still very eye-catching. That was because his current position happened to be on the path that the golden-haired behemoth had to pass. The gigantic beast seemed to feel that it had encountered a challenge. The enraged beast's eyes were bloodshot as it charged towards the veteran. "Old drunkard, you're crazy. Run." He was not the general of this city. He was just a veteran of the city defense army. Old drunkard Eric. Yes, this was his nickname and also his synonym. The reason was that he always liked to go to the tavern to drink a few glasses after being laid off. Even when he was on duty at the sentry post, he would always carry a bottle of cheap wine in his arms. "Old drunkard, aren't you afraid of getting drunk and dying in the gutter one day?" Every time someone made such an outrageous joke, the old drunkard would always pat his stomach and smile with his yellow teeth. "Sure, as long as Old Buck's gin wine fills my stomach, I will die in the gutter of your house tomorrow." At this moment, as if he did not hear his colleague's exclamation, the old drunkard Eric sniffled. His murky eyes were still staring at his own jar of wine. "Phut, this wine is as bad as always. How much water did little Buck add into it? Or maybe, he just added some wine into the water. Sigh, he's getting more and more heartless. Old Buck is still the kindest." Taking a sip of the wine that cost 3 copper coins, Eric squinted his eyes. He seemed to have returned to the past. At that time, his brothers and wife were still around. Although the gin wine in Buck's bar was also bad, at least the amount was more. However, at that time, he was not called an old drunkard. Arrow of Kasha Eric was a famous elite ranger. Before he was transferred to the city defense army due to his knee injury, he was a famous ruthless character. Why do I feel that something has changed? Although the weather was still cold, the pay was still pitifully low, and the wine in Old Buck's bar was equally bad, but at that time, his life was always good. Perhaps, it was because those old bastards and drunkards who had been with him were all there. *CK, it's all because of those damn orcs. And those useless nobles. They ran away before the battle even started. Little Sindern, when I see your dead Lord Father, see how I complain to him. I'll definitely get him to spank you. Just like before. Sigh, people always like to reminisce about those useless things when they're old. The veteran thought about how to complain to his old superior as he pulled out the rusty standard iron sword due to neglect. Phut, the old drunkard spat out a mouthful of wine, and his wet sword finally glinted with a cold light. The giant beast was already in front of him, but the old drunkard, who was swaying due to the earthquake, slowly began to adjust his helmet. Old Sindern said before, us soldiers are the face of the Lord. When we charge, we have to pay attention to our image. Oh right, I remember, at this time, we should also chant the charging slogan. What should I chant? The giant hand that could easily crush the bridge was in front of him. The veteran stopped thinking and shouted the slogan as he waved his sword and charged forward. That wholeheartedly, that sword that gave everything he had a glimmer of light. Vaguely, there was a sword aura. It had also reached the highest level of Ike's current life. Par. But the absolute difference in strength could not be made up with fighting spirit. The giant beast's steel claws fell, leaving only a pile of flesh and blood on the ground. Perhaps it was frightened by the veteran's sudden action, or perhaps the veteran's sword still managed to cut the giant beast's skin. The golden silk behemoth slowed down, paused for a moment, glanced at the veteran's corpse, and then continued to chase after the other deserters. The old drunkard was dead. He died completely. He did not have the sudden divine power to kill the enemy, nor did he use his own life to boost the morale of the soldiers and turn the tide of the battle. This was war. There were no protagonists, no miracles, only a bloody survival of the fittest. But even though he was dead, the final charging slogan still echoed in the air, carried far away by the cold wind. The will of mist will never yield. You are all murdering. You are all accomplices of the beast men. It was still the same old theater that served as the meeting place, but this time, it was the furious Renee who was shouting at the generals of the Allied army in exasperation. Ever since the news of the Beastmen's invasion came, the military leaders of the various countries had already held a joint conference for the entire morning. But they only progressed from pushing the blame to discussing how to strengthen the defense of Red Maple City, but they still had no intention of sending troops to rescue the other cities that were under attack. Cough, Your Highness, you should maintain your composure and the demeanor of a member of the royal family. You see, the enemy is strong and we are weak. Temporarily retreating is a strategic necessity. You see, strengthening our defense, gathering our troops and preparing for the final battle is the right thing to do now. Then what about the cities and citizens along the route of the Beastmen's invasion? They are still waiting for our rescue. Are we just going to watch them die like this? But no one responded to her suggestion. On the contrary, there were even people who spoke sarcastically. Why are you so agitated about the matters of other countries? Be careful of being accused of having ulterior motives. You can't even see the situation clearly, it's no wonder you are marginalized. If not for His Highness Roland's absence, you probably wouldn't even have the authority to attend. It's enough for a thing like the princess to obediently be a vase. It's best not to blindly command a war. Rescue? We currently have enough troops for the final battle. The country was small and weak, and she was young and had no reputation. Naturally, it was easy for her to run into a wall. From the start of the conference until now, even the pro-war faction was still focused on how to strengthen the defense of Red Maple City. Renee, who advocated for rescue, was ignored more than once. She was so angry that her face turned red, but she still couldn't do anything. In the end, she left in a huff. Marginalized. What happened recently? From a certain perspective, that person's wild guess was close to the truth and marginalized. This undoubtedly stepped on Renee's sore spot. From a certain point of time, Roland consciously made Renee stay away from important matters. This had already caused a lot of speculation within Donglan. If it was someone else who did this, for example, Renee would suspect whether they had ulterior motives, as if they had the ambition to gain power. But Roland, who had no interest in power, did this, which was incomprehensible. Recently, it's really been easy. Thinking of her juniors who were abnormally busy in all aspects, while she was obviously idle, how could she not think too much? It seems like this happened after that big sister Eliza came. What did they talk about? If it's just bad words, Big Brother Roland isn't that easy to change. Besides, his attitude towards me hasn't changed at all. Why did he isolate me outside? As she pondered, Renee vaguely thought of something, but it was hard to verify. The sky suddenly turned dark, and she didn't have the time to think too much. She hurriedly looked for cover to hide. In a few short seconds, the previously calm sky was also in chaos. A large number of harpies dropped tar bombs and retreated, while the fire brigade in the city was busy. At the same time, the air cavalry in the city were already on their way, taking down as many as they could. Although they couldn't completely eliminate the enemy, at least they couldn't let them go to the battlefield so easily. Your Highness, the generals have asked you to return for a meeting. The Beastmen's army is gathering. I'm afraid that they will go around the barrier and directly attack the city. Chapter 164. What is elemental magic? Complicated incantations and inexplicable summaries of rules. If it's so troublesome, how can magical beasts like us, who don't even have a written inheritance, use it? A warm voice sounded in the hall, attracting the attention of all the listeners. The ice dragon's gigantic body spread out so that no one could see its borders. With its eyes closed, the ice dragon slowly explained its understanding of magic. Magic. Magic is strange and unimaginable, while magic represents rules and influences on the world. When put together, it is to change reality through unimaginable means. Currently, the mainstream masters of magic were undoubtedly human archmages. Their magic originated from the elves. Of course, compared to the elves' era where the elves primarily focused on the four major elements, the elves had improved immeasurably. However, their research methods and techniques were still passed down from generation to generation. The most obvious proof was that the elves all emphasized various complicated hand gestures, incantations, and rituals. But if you ask me, those messy things are really unnecessary. The melodious voice was like a musical note. The ice phoenix rested on the forehead of the huge ice dragon, but as the top of the snow elves, her mere presence caused the snowflakes in the sky to fall slowly. Those long ears are a bunch of paranoid people. They are sensitive and paranoid, stubbornly believing that magic is also a kind of craft that can be explained, and created a bunch of messy runes. But I have to say, they really came up with something. But it's a pity that they lost the source of magic from the beginning. The deep voice was full of sarcasm and disdain. The magic lion of ice lay on the back of the ice phoenix. Its gigantic body was like a small cat in comparison to the even larger behemoth. Humans learn from elves, elves learn from nature. Hee, isn't the so-called nature us natural magical beasts and elemental creatures? It's a pity that they didn't learn the basics, but from the moment they chose to research instead of understanding, they are getting further and further away from the truth. The will of a god is a divine technique, and the rage of a demon lord is enough to change the entire world. Meanwhile, my ice phoenix Asiali tattoo can create a blizzard that covers the entire mountain range with a single glance. Isn't this the same as using unimaginable power to change reality? Those long ears are used to making things complicated, but they have lost the basics. Only the so-called legendary level can condense their own seal of will. Only those at the saint level could change the world with their will. Ha 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 ha, what a joke. We've come back to square one. We could have done it from the very beginning. Warlocks with alien bloodlines, special races with all kinds of strange racial talents, are their miraculous powers not magic? Isn't the definition of elves a little too biased? So, youngsters, put aside those unnecessary complications and mysteries. That's not suitable for you. What you need to do is to make up your mind to change the world. Just like this. Liz Slenus. As the inexplicable words fell, the will of the ice dragon descended. The might in the air was suffocating. The endless might caused all living beings present to feel instinctive fear. This was the wrath that originated from ancient times. Doomsday dragon might? What was that? I only released my existence. What does the fear of those little worms have to do with me? I can see that all the weak will have to close their eyes. I have descended, and all the dregs will have to lower their heads. I am angry, and all the despicable will have to kneel. My will is my existence. I am the dragon of doom, Excelsius. I am destruction. Beneath my ice wings is the land of the doomsday. The gigantic dragon seemed to be roaring angrily. He was declaring his existence, and the entire mountain range was trembling in fear in response to him. Everything comes from the soul. Listen to the voice of your soul, and you'll obtain your own magic. That's the secret most suitable for you. Perhaps it's only a magic spell, but when you truly comprehend it, it can be any magic spell. The ice phoenix flapped its wings, and the snowflakes in the sky began to change their forms. Meteors, snowflakes, and snowblades. Fortunately, by the time they landed on the ground, they had already transformed into cute snow dolls. These lively snow dolls actually began to build snowmen with their own bodies. The snow spirits were already alive. And in order to distinguish it from those foolish elves, we call it the origin magic. Of course, you can also call it natural magic. Ordinary human mags are unable to grasp it, but existences that have condensed a soul imprint can use their will to affect the world just like magical beasts. They can try to reach the origin. Roland, do you understand now? The berserk lion's roar reverberated throughout the entire world. The sound waves actually began to shatter glacier. The king of Frigid Moor was currently teaching his juniors the true meaning of magic. Now that I finally understood why the other brats disappeared the moment they heard that class was about to begin, I also began to understand why these three powerful existences were so happy. Even though I was the only listener, I had a pensive expression on my face. Indeed, I was thinking about something. Can I ask you a question? Go ahead. I know that you must have many questions right now. Our magic theories should be completely different from what you've come into contact with in the past. Child, relax. We're not scary. From a certain standpoint, we're all family. I told you before that human etiquette is meaningless to us. Just tell me directly. After receiving a positive answer, I nodded and made up my mind. I asked the question that I had been paying attention to since the very beginning of class. I'm slightly obsessive. I'm afraid that I won't be able to sleep well tonight if I don't know the answer to this question. The gazes of these three top-level existences seemed to cause the air to freeze. Alright, it really did freeze. And so, I finally asked the question. Why are you all stacking on top of each other? Is it because you think it's cool? I suddenly feel that it's quite interesting. Can I stand at the highest point? I'm really light. Is that the main point? The gigantic dragon trembled slightly. The ground also trembled slightly. You two idiots. What pyramid style, and you even want that old turtle in the lake to join the 4 heavenly kings? I already said that this position is so ugly. Your way of thinking is just like the Mist King from back in the day. As expected of a descendant of the Mist. But, that's absolutely impossible. How can someone stand on top of my head? Lion head. Then can someone stand on top of our heads? Did you mention this back in the day in order to stand on top of our heads? The two of them spoke in unison. Then, they happily started counting down on each other's time. Cough, in front of the juniors, you need to care about your face. Apart from this, did you learn anything else? The ice phoenix transformed into a streak of light and instantly appeared in front of me. You need to be careful with your nickname, and you need to be even more careful with your lines. Phut, something like the Dragon of Doom is too embarrassing. I am destruction, my wings. Alright, my lord, please restrain your dragon aura. This name is excellent. It doesn't sound like a chunibya at all. Don't you know what chunibya is? That's a term used by humans in the outside world. It refers to the moment when a person is so handsome that it's unbearable to look at them. Yep, that period of time is very important to a person. It's the time when they shine the brightest. Whenever they recall it, they'll be so excited that they'll roll on the ground. I think that the nickname Chunibya Wing suits you very well. Do you like it? That's wonderful, Lord Chunibya Wing. After fooling the new Lord Chunibya Wing, I smiled and waved my hand at the lion head in front of me. A formless and colorless chill spread out. There was no dazzling magical light, nor was there a shocking sound. There was only a light blue ice crystal dancing in my palm. Yep, thank you seniors for your guidance. I've already found it. So it's always been by my side. From a certain standpoint, I had indeed benefited greatly. The 3 Apex Masters of Ice had pointed out a new path for me, a path that was completely different from traditional elemental magic. I was already itching to try out my new abilities. Just as I was proudly describing my new understandings and understanding, the silver bracelet on my finger suddenly vibrated slightly, transmitting a message that made me feel unwell. That damned little bastard. Unfilial descendant. Idiot. I'm going to kill him. While the vultures of war were circling the skies of the Northlands, Antoon, who was surrounded by the various armies, was quietly undergoing changes. Under the cover of the black fog of the night, the figures in black cloaks quietly snuck into the city. Under the guidance of the royal attendants, they silently entered the palace. When they left before dawn with a satisfied smile on their faces, many things would change. Will of Mist. Hee. Unyielding. Pooey. The black-cloaked figure's disdain was still lingering in the wind. Meanwhile, on a nearby window, a young couple was chatting in low voices. Their gazes passed through the obstructing buildings. How could this be? Didn't we tell that damn fatty that we would protect him? He doesn't even believe in the gods now, so why would he trust us? Damn it, how could this be? This is completely out of Roland's expectations. How about I go kill them? Is there any use? Unless you kill that damn fatty with the crown, there's no way to send another envoy. No, even if you kill him, it's meaningless. You should hurry up and contact Roland. There's no need. If I'm not wrong, this news will shock the entire world very soon. What will Roland do after hearing this news? It's as if he risked his life to protect something that someone else stepped on and even spat on it. He probably won't feel good about it. What else can he do? You should be asking what will happen to the Northlands. From a certain perspective, morals and the rules on the surface are the chains that bind Roland. If he were to really go on a rampage, not only will the entire Northlands change, the entire world won't be able to take it. Just as Marguerite predicted, a day later, a sudden piece of news shook the entire world. The Sleware Kingdom announces its unconditional surrender, stating that it is willing to submit to the rule of the Beastman chieftain and acknowledges Emon Bloodaxe as its adoptive father. King Fumel Casso has made serious negotiations with the human countries still on his territory, requesting for them to withdraw their troops quickly. Otherwise, it will be viewed as an invasion. Shameless. How can they be so shameless? Every country is rescuing him now. Invasion? How is that possible? The people of the Mist have never surrendered in the past 1,000 years. Even when their country was nearly destroyed several times, they managed to hold on. This is definitely fake news. It's impossible for the Mist Kingdom to surrender. The reinforcements from the various countries were at a loss. Weren't they here to rescue their allies a moment ago? How did they become invaders in the blink of an eye? Was there even a need to fight this war? What was the purpose of their blood and sacrifices? The people of Sleware suffered an even greater blow. Just when they decided to fight to the end, the Supreme King had already surrendered. Unknowingly, they had become the vanquished of their country, and they even had to expel their allies who had come to their aid. That was the deepest despair. The people of the Mist, who prided themselves on their tenacious and unyielding nationality, had never felt so ashamed before. For the first time, they experienced betrayal and despair, as well as humiliation. It doesn't even feel dirty when mud is applied to one's face. Someone said. There were some who chose to commit suicide the very next day. They were unwilling to accept the reality that their country had already surrendered. Their unyielding temperament might seem foolish, but it was the very foundation of their people. It was also the reason why they were able to stand up again and again after being defeated. Even in the darkest and most desperate of situations, they didn't consider the possibility of surrendering. Even when the Mist Kingdom was destroyed 300 years ago, they continued to rebuild their own Mist Kingdom. You can kill me, but you can't make me kneel down. The people of the Mist will never bend their backs. We will never surrender, we will never be slaves. For so many years, against the beast men, demons, elves, and invaders from other countries, in the face of countless desperate situations, the people of the Mist had always shouted this. They had also used their lives to fulfill their promises, and it was precisely because of this characteristic that they had always been able to stand tall in the north of the continent. This time, even though the suffering of war and the pressuring beast men were difficult to deal with, the people of the Mist didn't lose their determination to resist to the end. Even though they were in a desperate situation, they still believed that they and their country would obtain the final victory. Even in the current desperate situation, the optimistic people were still able to talk about the past and present based on history. They laughed and said, "This kind of desperate situation is nothing, we have been through it countless times." They still believed that they would obtain the final victory, and that the knight and the royal family who protected them would allow them to obtain another glorious victory. Those Northland barbarians don't know what despair is. They are smelly and hard, just like the frozen rocks of the northern lands. There is no possibility of conquering them. The people of the Mist took the evaluation of the Southland barbarians as glory. No matter how difficult the suffering before them was, they still didn't understand what despair was. They believed that they would obtain the final victory. The people of the world had always believed that the people of the mist would never surrender, and that they would have to submit. However, the letter of surrender from the distant king created a new history. For the first time in history, the people of the mist lost their desire for victory. Their numb and despairing eyes made one's heart ache. Some of the people chose to commit suicide in despair, while others turned their vengeful gazes towards the person on the throne. We will never submit. The royal family of the mist will never submit. As expected, that person isn't fit to be our king. The rumors are true, he is just a fake king. Following which, another piece of news spread across the entire northern lands at lightning speed, shocking the entire world. However, it also allowed the people of the mist to regain their confidence and hope. I am the last descendant of the mist, Roland Mist. I hereby declare that Fummel Casso is the fake king, and the decisions he makes have no credibility to speak of. I hereby declare a crusade, and I swear to crusade. I will raise the war flag of the mist, and I hope that all the people of the mist will follow me to crusade against the fake king. The will of the mist will never submit. If translated into the vernacular, it would probably be, damn it, what that bastard says doesn't count. Fummel, you little bastard, just you wait, I am going to skin you. The announcement was short, and it didn't have any legal justification. However, very quickly, the people of the Sluware kingdom tore down the national emblem and the portrait of the king, and silently replaced it with a new portrait. Not knowing the facial features of the model. That was the case for the sculptures in the central squares of the various cities. All these years, he and his brothers had never left. On the flag that was raised once again was the same fortress that stood tall in the howling winds. However, this time, the people were muttering a name. King of the Mist Roland, our king is about to return, our true king is about to return, and we have not surrendered yet. The people of the mist will never submit. Chapter 165. Above the boundless ice plains, a desolate scene filled the eyes. When the winter sun rose, the dark horizon was the gathering of warhorses and warriors. The beast men are here. After a simple announcement, the first wave of catapults and tactical magic spells began to carry out their duties on the battlefield. Huge rocks flew into the sky with a terrifying sound of wind. Every time they fell, dozens of lives would be taken. Originally, Red Maple City was just an ordinary town with 2 layers of walls. However, after the various countries invested in it without caring about the cost, it had become a fortified city with 4 layers of walls. There were also countless defensive equipment. Earth mags might not have powerful and flashy offensive magic spells like other elemental mags, but when it came to construction and engineering work, they had an advantage that other elemental mags couldn't compare to. Tall walls were instantly erected, and the moat was forcibly widened by 7 to 8 meters with the sound of mud to mud. The alchemy poison flowing in the moat might not be very toxic, but it was still able to enter. The city walls were at least 3 times taller than before. Ballistas and heavy engineering cannons filled the towering city walls. Griffin knights were circling and patrolling in the sky, looking for any blind spots that could lead to openings. Countless catapults were built on the various platforms of the city walls. This kind of time-honored siege and defense weapon would be able to display satisfactory power as long as there were enough scholars and craftsmen. There was no difference between the huge rocks falling from the sky and the meteor spell, as they could kill a large number of people with a single hit. Simple, violent, effective, low cost, and effective. These were the reasons why catapults were a necessity on the battlefield. However, this time, they had just entered the range of the largest catapult. At such a distance, it was impossible for them to pose a threat to precise attacks. Instead, they were more of a deterrent. On the battlefield, there is no place that is safe. Not to be outdone, the beast men counterattacked. The range of the mobile catapults was limited, and the largest catapult only managed to hit the city walls with great difficulty, causing a cloud of dust and gravel to rise. However, this earned the ridicule of the defending troops. Not long ago, the broken stones and boulders outside the city had been cleared. The usable stones were stored in the city as stone bullets. If the beast men wanted to find something suitable for themselves, they would have to rely on long-distance transportation. At the same time, at the West Gate, the Donglan soldiers who were assigned to defend the city were preparing for war. As the temporary leader, Renee's palms were sweaty. This was her second time in a war, but it was her first time participating as a soldier. Hold on, Renee, you can do it. Big brother Roland was even younger than you are now when he went to the battlefield. What she didn't know was that while she was silently cheering herself on, many people with ulterior motives were secretly watching her, and some existences were constantly prying into the mysteries of this world through her eyes. There was a saying that good intentions did bad things, which was quite common. But there was also a saying that bad intentions did good things, which was quite rare. The surrender of the coward Fisma Casso had directly brought great humiliation to the Sluware kingdom, and as the first descendant of the Mist to surrender, in name only, he had allowed himself to be hung on the pillar of shame in history, but at the same time, he had brought about an extremely bizarre yet important impact on the war situation. Firstly, due to the entire kingdom's fall and the royal family's surrender, the nominal Sluware kingdom became a subordinate of the beast men overnight. For a moment, the city lords and domain lords of the various cities and towns were at a loss as to what to do. However, the Beastman army bypassed the various cities and directly reached the deepest part of the city, Red Maple City. They've already surrendered, so what's the point of fighting? The second impact was the elves' declaration of war against the beast men. Yes, they declared war. That silent alliance only lasted for less than half a month before it directly turned into a hostile relationship. This time, the elf king of the Tassel Kingdom was ruthless. The human bastard he chose as the fuse was a citizen of San Antonio, and he even had the identity of a noble of the Kasomi Duchy. As for the middleman and slave trader, it was a noble of Sluware, and it was said that he had some relations with Fuml. Thus, in an instant, the target of the war was locked onto the Sluware kingdom and the Kasomi Duchy. Naturally, San Antonio would not be able to get away from this relationship. His plan was good. As long as the war went smoothly, he would use this fuse to escalate the war, inciting the resentment of the people and letting the war spread. Since it was revenge for the leader of the anti-war faction, Princess Swana, the peace faction and anti-war faction in the country would not be able to say anything against it. However, if the main culprit, the target Sluware, surrendered to the beast men, and ended up being protected by the beast men, who should they go to for revenge? The famous General Black Bear Ainlo was rough but meticulous. He was also quite bold. After knowing about the death of the Dove of Peace, he immediately smelled the scent of a conspiracy. He immediately removed the name of the bastard noble from Kasomi Duchy, tied up his brother and sent him to the elves, and attached a sincere letter of apology. Hearing about the tragedy, while grieving, I express my deep regret. We will not tolerate the murderer. Since he is already dead, we will send his brother, wife and daughter as sacrifices to comfort the soul of Princess Swana in heaven. All right, this was indeed very unkind and shameless. However, in a sense, it was indeed effective against the famous stubborn elves. The human kingdom had also understood the temperament of these elves, who were amenable to coaxing but not coercion. They would rather suffer for their pride. Which family doesn't have a few unfilial descendants? Sincerely apologize. The Kasomi Duchy has already done very well. Using the wife and child of a sinner as sacrifices is simply the same as the barbaric beast men. If this news were to spread, it would not be good for the reputation of the Tassel Kingdom and the elves. When this kind of news spread, the pro-war faction of the Tassel Kingdom knew that the situation was not good. The Kingdom of the Elves was the birthplace of the Archon system and the Parliament system. It was the symbol of equality and freedom in the eyes of the people. The elves who were known as the Free Kingdom had different political systems, but the royal power was weak. In the eyes of the pro-war faction, if the majority of the elves satisfied their desire for revenge and requested to stop the war with their ally, then wouldn't Swana's sacrifice be in vain? How could they accept such an inexplicable ending? How were they going to explain to the elven gods who wanted to intensify the conflict? On the other hand, the elves were very particular about their reputation and reputation. If there was no righteous war, wouldn't they become evil invaders? How could the kind and peace-loving elves become evil invaders? We must be on the side of justice. Our targets must be heinous villains. Thus, a piece of conclusive information was dug out. Among it was evidence of the elves being abducted and sold in recent years. Those elven traffickers and slave hunters were actually backed by the government. The culprit, or the mastermind behind the scenes, was Sleware, his nobles, and the royal family. Actually, since the evil slave trade was taking place in this country, and the government actually turned a blind eye to it, how could the upper echelons of this country be clean after the bloody profit chain was established? Alright then, everything that happened next would be King Fummel's fault. But to be honest, with the hundreds of elven dancers in his palace, he really didn't blame the wrong people. In the elves' eyes, they weren't invading at all. They were taking revenge and upholding justice. The evil Sleware kingdom would have to pay the price, and the evil humans would be banished from the elven kingdom. But now, the elves met with a small problem. Sleware had surrendered. The people of the Mist, who had never surrendered before, had surrendered. In the eyes of these long-lived species, this was as inconceivable as the elves suddenly becoming open-minded and magnanimous, the dwarfs becoming clean and tidy, and the beast men becoming educated and reasonable. But Sleware had indeed surrendered. In that case, whether or not the elves should still take revenge became a major problem. If they didn't take revenge, they wouldn't be able to take it lying down, nor would they be able to explain themselves to certain existences. But if they wanted to take revenge, would they have to take revenge on Fummel, who was under the rule of the beast men? Would the beast men be willing to give up the major victory they had obtained after so much difficulty? Foolish beast men, hand over that Fummel and his bloody subordinates, and we can still negotiate. Wait a moment, why are you dragging me around? The elven envoys were as arrogant as ever, causing a negotiation that had a 90% chance of failure to become an absolute failure. But this was also the result that a certain elven king wanted. Esteemed priests, please tell that lord that his will definitely be carried out. Anslo Schuster Adelban. This was a very long name, but it was an abbreviation that omitted more than 10 short words. There were many things he had done in his life, and he had created quite a few titles. However, there was one adjective that perfectly described his characteristics: main god of the elves. The Order gods were composed of many different divine factions, and there were only 7 main gods among them. This was enough to prove how powerful Anslo was. By the way, it was also Anslo who had exiled Rose, causing the Dark Elves to collectively fall into depravity. Anslo was also one of the main targets that Heloise had sworn to take revenge on. As the main god of the elves and the guardian god of the entire elven species, how could Anslo's will possibly be disobeyed? And so, the elves directly declared war on the beast men. They declared war on the beast men who attempted to protect Fummel. As expected of the elves, their brain structure. It seems that no elven expert was able to evaluate such a change. I'm afraid that we'll have to revise our elven studies textbooks again. CHMPH, the more intense the battle, the better. It would be best if both sides perished together. While many human kingdoms' military strategists were astonished by this, they also fervently anticipated a dog-eat-dog comedy. However, they soon discovered that this declaration of war was nothing more than a pretense. While the beast men gave up on other cities and focused on preparing for the final battle, the elves began to take over this show of slaughter. Of course, the elven language that they were so proud of didn't have such a filthy word as slaughter. The elves used the word cleanse. Overflowing hatred was contagious, and bloodthirsty insanity was contagious. Soon, the trials went out of control. Finding evidence that a noble's ancestor was involved in the elven slave trade was enough to sentence that noble's family to death. What? My grandfather was actually a mercenary in the past. You can't even tell where he used to earn a living? In that case, I'm sorry, but since you can't prove that he's innocent, he's guilty. And if he's guilty, that means that you're guilty. The elven priests acting as judges also fell into an inexplicable frenzy. In their trials, which were filled with the presumption of guilt and implicating others, very few people would be able to escape unscathed. Compared to the beast men, the elves' only advantage was that they temporarily didn't touch the commoners. Or perhaps it should be said that they didn't take the initiative to touch the commoners. Besides, it was impossible for there to be no deaths or injuries in battle. Faced with their own losses, the so-called elegance of the elves was probably to give the defending soldiers a way to die that wouldn't be too unsightly. And so, the fallen city was filled with human heads. The commoners who were fortunate enough to survive looked at the long-eared elves with eyes filled with hatred. What an insane display of loyalty. I'm afraid that the Northland's elves will never be able to return to how they were in the past. Perhaps, after this calamity, there will be no elves left. As for me, I could see sorrow in the elves' madness. Only the true gods would be able to control the will of the priests. Since the true gods no longer cared about their reputation, it was likely that they themselves had fallen into despair and madness. The elves chose to betray the Order gods at the very first moment and become the vanguard in a divine war. In this generation where vanguard and cannon fodder were synonymous, it was likely that the elven gods would all fall together. This really is a banquet for traitors. As I said this, I kept checking the letter I wrote to another traitor. Whether or not this traitor had the intention to change sides was directly related to the victory of this battle. Dear Lady Rose, greetings. I'm your loyal fan, Roland Mist. Perhaps you've heard of me before. I've long been looking forward to your art of interrogation, and I've always wanted to find an opportunity to exchange some pointers with you. You've also heard about the recent events, so I have a small suggestion for you. Chapter 166. No one lives forever. No one is immortal. Amidst the snow and ice, the silver-robed visitor knocked on the door of the palace with an eerie laugh and a strange word that no one could understand. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of the knocker was unbelievably loud, but in the ears of the citizens, it reminded them of the sudden funeral bell. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of knocking on the door reverberated back and forth, filled with ominous magic, making people even more upset. Little Fuml, are you there? Hehe, I'm here to play with you. The uninvited guest under the city wall seemed to be whispering, but his words, through an inexplicable medium, spread to every room in the palace. King Fuml suddenly woke up from his dream. He just had a nightmare of being chased by a malicious spirit, but then, the echoing low voice and eerie laughter rang in the ears of the fat king. Hehe, little Fuml, I'm here to play with you. The eerie voice was right behind him. Fuml suddenly turned around, but there was only a wall, and naturally, no one was there. Little Fuml, I know you're at home, stop hiding. This time, the voice rang in his ears. Fuml suddenly jumped up, pulled out the sword under his pillow, and wanted to slash at the source of the voice, but the target of the blade was only the frightened elf concubine. When the fat Fuml was frightened by the eerie scene in front of him and took a deep breath, the banging sound of the door behind him made him furious. Who is it? Who dares to disturb me at this time? I found you. Up, come, and play. The voice that made people gasp sounded again. At this time, Fuml remembered that his room door was in front of him, and behind him. Clap, clap, clap. The window was hit by an inexplicable white handprint, and a pale, smiling face was stuck on the window, the crescent-shaped eyes flashing with red light. Wait, I, little, fee, moo, I, ma, come, find, you. The more smiley face spoke, the happier he became. In the end, the corners of his mouth stretched all the way to his cheeks, turning into a terrifying grimace. That was definitely not a human's face. In an instant, an inexplicable chill rose from his spine. The concubine beside him had already fainted from fright, and the terrified Fuml Casso threw out his life-saving trump card. Boom! The precious potion was instantly activated, and flames spread everywhere as half of the room was directly blown up. Swish, swish, swish. After the lingering smoke dissipated, a cold wind blew in, but there was nothing in front of him. Looking at the remaining room that had been turned into an open-air terrace, only snowflakes kept falling in, but the person who had spoken was nowhere to be seen. And in Phizma's ears, a low, hoarse laughter sounded again. No one lives forever, no one lives forever. You can run, but you definitely won't be able to escape. Finally, the strange voice that he could not shake off was still in his ears, and the cowardly Fuml was on the verge of breaking down, letting out a piercing scream like a woman. Guards! Guards! There's an assassin. Someone wants to kill me. He rushed to the corridor naked, and the guards who rushed over looked at the impolite king in disbelief. The fat body could not run for more than a few steps before collapsing and panting heavily. Then, the screaming Fummel suddenly pulled out a sword from the guard and slashed at the curtain that was swaying with the wind. What are you all looking at? There's an assassin. You useless things. Have you all been bribed by that person, and want to kill me? Let me tell you, if I die, I will definitely drag all of you down with me, absolutely. The scene in front of them shocked the guards and knight, but at the same time, they showed an expression of hatred and pity to Fummel. In their eyes, this man who mocked them as useless things had most likely gone mad. Why are you all looking at me like that? You bunch of useless things. If it weren't for you all being so useless, would I be forced to rely on those filthy and useless orcs? It's all your fault. It's all because you idiots are useless. The angry king waved the sharp sword in his hand wildly. The little bit of foundation left behind from when he was young was barely acceptable, but to the knight, this blunt waving of the sword was meaningless. It only allowed them to dodge the attack easily, and they looked at the crazy king with even more pity. Ha, ha! Soon, Fummel, who was emptied by wine and women, sat down again helplessly. He panted heavily, feeling that it was very effective, and both of them were not in a good mood. He subconsciously pulled his neck, which was getting harder and harder to touch, but what he touched was not the flesh that he expected. It was a pair of cold arms, tightly strangling his neck, and the cold breath was already behind his ear. It was still the same hoarse and deep voice. Caught, you. Ah. The king was so frightened that he screamed crazily, but the guards were getting more and more confused. They did not see anything strange, they only saw Fummel going crazy alone. In their eyes, Fummel suddenly strangled his neck and screamed, and he was even rolling on the ground. His tongue was pulled out, but he was still using more strength, as if he was afraid that he would not die. Even though some of them were smiling as if they were looking for trouble, most of the guards hurried over to help. After all, as the guards of the king, if the king they served died in such a strange way, their honor would be tarnished. But this time, they quickly found out that King Fummel was not going crazy. Boom! The entire wall was smashed open by brute force, and a giant lion made of ice stretched its head in. The inexplicable majesty and the spreading cold air were equally fatal. Wasn't the silver-robed man on the back of the lion the uninvited guest who knocked on the door just now? Yo, no one opened the door after I waited for a long time, so I came up myself. That's right, little guy, I told you before, you can escape, but you can't escape. Facing the guards who were on high alert, I casually waved my hand, and a ghost-like blue ghost flew up from where Fummel was and circled around me, as if it was a child looking forward to receiving a reward. Flames rose behind me, and the flashes of magic illuminated half the starry sky. It seemed that Adam and Marguerite had attracted the attention of those strong guards as I had expected, but I had to hurry. And so, I drew my sword, and the blue ghost happily wrapped around Roland's sacred sword, transforming into a blazing ice-sacred flame. It was obvious that my action of drawing my sword made the audience before me nervous, but I shook my head and sheathed my sacred sword again. As the sacred sword returned to its sheath, the azure ice flames were finally extinguished and the bizarre apparition returned to its slumber. Even I heaved a sigh of relief. This new ability was far too bizarre and even I didn't feel good about it. Ayo, I didn't expect that this ability would be so useful in finding and scaring people. However, this wasn't the time to conclude the matter. The royal guards would forever be the most elite warriors of a country, and the ones surrounding us were the elites of the elites. They formed a battle formation and protected Fummel in the center. Those who came didn't come with good intentions, and those who were kind didn't come. When I came, I caused too much of a commotion. Now, they didn't want to make any mistakes, but rather, they wanted to protect their king and wait for reinforcements to arrive. You. Who are you? Did that fellow ask him to come and kill me? As if the guards had given him courage, Fummel actually roared angrily at me. You're only half right. I am indeed here to kill you, but I have no intention of letting others do it for me. Cleaning up my own mess has always been my code of conduct. Thus, I took off my hood, shook off the snow, and smiled at him. Roland. However, he rudely let out a scream of a higher decibel, which made me unhappy. Thus, I extended my hand, and blue magic power appeared in my palm. The blue handprint that was strangling Fummel's neck appeared again, and this time, it dragged him over. In the blink of an eye, Fummel was dragged in front of me by the ghostly hand. While the other guards paled in shock, they hurried over to snatch him away. As royal guards, there were a few gold rank experts in front of me. At this moment, they were charging at me with full force, their killing intent soaring. However, I wasn't the only one they were facing. Idiots, keep quiet. Gui Ming, as one of the elders of Frigid Moor, the companion of the first Mist King, was at least 1,700 years old, and his strength was unfathomable. Yet, at this moment, with just a roar, he was able to imprint one unlucky knight after another onto the wall. Looking at this trash whose eyes were filled with fear, I couldn't help but feel anger rising in my heart. Are you worthy of being called a descendant of the Mist? Bastard, are you worthy of being called the Mist King? It was all because of his weakness and selfishness that everything developed in the worst direction. If he had listened to my advice earlier and prepared for battle, all of this wouldn't have happened. How could the Beastman army have invaded the core of the Mist Kingdom as though it was no man's land? One wrong thought, and blood flowed like a river. Pang! Thinking of the countless sacrifices, I couldn't hold it in anymore and punched him hard in the face. Using a vile person, not listening to your words, watching the beast men invade. Arrogant, ignorant, and reckless, are you worthy of being a king? Pang! Another punch landed on the right side of his face. This time, a few teeth fell out. Fummel's mouth was full of blood, and he sobbed, as though he was begging for mercy. However, seeing him begging for mercy made me even angrier. In this battle, I had already seen countless human heads hanging on trees. They probably didn't even have the chance to cry and beg for mercy. No, most of them wouldn't even beg for mercy. They risked everything just to protect their families and homes, but this damn fatty in front of me, watching as your country fell, withdrawing all your troops to protect yourself, not using any of your troops to ask for help from other cities. Cowardly, selfish, foolish, and short-sighted, are you worthy of being a king? Boom. This time, I punched him hard in the stomach, and he bent over like a shrimp in pain. Indulging in debauchery and causing chaos in the palace, are you worthy of being a king? Looking at the panicking elven concubines in front of me, I couldn't help but think of those things. If it wasn't for the fact that even King Fummel was involved in the slave trade, how could there have been so many grudges, and how could things have gotten so out of hand? Colluding with other races and harming your own people, are you worthy of being a king? In order to exchange for Beastman women with the Beastman chieftain, he actually transferred the defending army, allowing the Beastmen to steal the famous human beauties. When I heard this news, I couldn't imagine that such a shameless king could exist. Killing your own people and plotting to steal the throne, are you worthy of being a king? Unlike the Mist royalty in the past, all of Fummel's brothers and sisters had died pitifully. Compared to those disgusting crimes, my own assassination was only a small matter. I punched him again and again, but the more I punched him, the angrier I got. If it wasn't for the super idiot in front of me, how could things have developed to such a state? How could the will of Mist, which we risked everything to protect, suffer such humiliation? When everyone was fighting for their lives, you actually surrendered. You actually dared to surrender. You actually had the guts to surrender. You are the first king to surrender in the Mist Kingdom's nearly 2,000 years of history. Cowardly and treacherous, you are worthy of being a king. What is the use of having you? Ah! A vicious elbow and a kick broke Fummel's spine, and he lay on the ground, barely able to breathe. But what I had to do was only the beginning. Breaking one's promise as a king, losing one's people as a king, losing one's morals as a human. In the name of the last descendant of the Mist, Roland Mist, I request that Fummel Casso be removed from the position of king. I, Frigid Moor Gui Ming, as a member of the first king's royal family, approve the request to remove Fummel Casso from the position of king, and propose that Roland Mist temporarily take over the position of King of Mist. Chapter 167. To break one's promise as a ruler, to lose one's people as a king, to lose one's morals as a person. In the name of the last descendant of the Mist, Roland Mist, I hereby abrogate Fummel Casso from the throne. The lion of the former king made a gesture, and with the help of the talent ability of this ancient frigid Moor who was proficient in sound waves, my angry roar could be heard to every corner of the entire city. The badly mutilated king lay on the ground, while the furious me stood on a high platform in the palace, announcing my decision to the world. The goatskin parchment that I had prepared beforehand was spread out, and crimes that few people knew about were announced to the public. Mystical magic tricks caused these blood-like words to float in the air, making them exceptionally eye-catching. Crime number 1, cold-blooded and heartless, venomous, familicide. Crime number 14, extravagance, wasting resources, watching as the citizens starved to death while enjoying luxurious clothes and delicious food. Crime number 15, colluding with other tribes, nurturing a tiger to invite calamity, inviting a wolf into the house. The shocking crimes caused all the houses to open their windows and listen to the broadcast from the palace. The more I read, the angrier I got. Looking at the dozens of crimes at the end, I didn't even want to hear them anymore, so I just tore it apart and started complaining from the bottom of my heart. We'll just ignore these messy things, but the most important thing is that I don't like you, you coward. That's why I want you to scram from the throne of the mist. More than 1,700 years ago, the Northlands was a rotten place. The weather was cold, the ground was frozen, and magical beasts were everywhere. Now, it has all the bad conditions, but back then, it was also a famous place for exiles. If criminals from various countries were to be thrown here, they would die within 3 to 5 years. And if they didn't die, it would be even more troublesome. Without the ability to survive, they would most likely become villains who roamed the land and robbed others. Natural disasters, man-made disasters, and beast disasters all came together. Back then, even if the Northlands wasn't hell on earth, it wasn't much worse. As they listened to Roland's description and compared it to the current scene, the people of the Mist vaguely guessed something. At that time, the former King Rivendell, who had suffered greatly in the north, unexpectedly obtained the power of the Frigid Moor contract. He was determined to build his own country on this barren land. He never said that he wanted to defend the borders of the entire human society. He just had enough of these precarious days. He hoped to build a home for himself and his people, a new home that would not be humiliated and oppressed by outsiders. As the sun rose, the angry roar resounded throughout the city. After a brief moment of shock, the name of Prince Roland and the deep voice made the passers-by stop and listen patiently. Back then, everyone laughed at him for overestimating himself and thought he was a lunatic. After all, at that time, the last holy war had just ended. A centipede died, but it did not fall down. The beast men were still as strong as ever. Building a country here was equivalent to building a fortress on the front lines of the war between the beast men and the humans. It was inevitable that the beast men would retaliate crazily. Besides, he was just a poor kid. He even had to find a way to feed himself, so how could he find resources and food to be self-sufficient? But there is nothing absolutely impossible in this world. Rivendell went through many hardships and forcefully turned the impossible into the possible and built his own home in this frozen land. No valuable specialties or wealth. He believed that there was always a way out. He found his dwarven friends and organized an engineering team of the natives. Inch by inch, shovel by shovel, he forcefully found his own specialties in this barren land, magic minerals. No strong city defenses to deal with external threats. At the border, he and his followers used their bare hands to dig trenches and sentry posts. They used their feet to replace the patrolling riders and used their flesh and blood to build the city walls to protect their people. Young people who were just about to start work, women who were preparing food for their families, and old people who were taking a stroll. When they heard the story of the late king that wasn't recorded in history books, they couldn't help but stop in their tracks. Praise the late king. It was you who built a home for us and allowed us to live with dignity. We admit that our lives are tough. We have nothing in our pockets. I can't guarantee that we won't change after fighting with me. But, what I am sure of is that if we don't do anything that we might not be able to change, and if we do, we might not be able to change anything. But if we must starve or freeze to death in the midst of hunger and cold, I at least hope that I have done my last bit. This was what the late king said. In the face of the harsh nature, there is no such thing as a miracle from the heavens. There is no such thing as an inexplicable hope. We can only rely on ourselves and our companions. This is the so-called will of mist. And the late king and those Northlanders who chose to follow him became the earliest people of the mist. Unlike those ancient tribes, most of us are mixed bloods. But what distinguishes us from the mist is not our bloodline or skin color. As long as a Northlander possesses the will of mist, he is a member of the mist. These were the original words of the late king, and it is the truth that we, the descendants of the mist, have always believed in. 1423 years ago, that was the first time the Mist Kingdom was on the brink of destruction. The nightmarish demon army opened the door to the lower planes. Countless demons and devils rushed out of the door, and in a single night, the Mist Kingdom lost 17 cities. The capital, Defy, was in a state of emergency. But the people of the Mist didn't despair. In order to protect their homeland, they paid countless sacrifices and forcefully swept the demons back to their homeland. And the traces left behind from that time are still there. It is the demon abyss of Anweima. No, the most important trace and legacy left behind is still the war flag that was raised in the Howling Winds. At that time, the Will of Mist and the Mist War flag were stained with blood for the first time. We walked on a completely different path of development from the Northlands of the Central Plains. Uninteresting and inflexible became the most obvious characteristics of our tribe, and our unyielding will and temperament became the badge of our pride. The citizens silently looked at the Mist War flag that could be seen everywhere, and they faintly felt a new understanding. Perhaps, the inheritance wasn't just the bloodline, but a deeper layer of secrets waiting to be unearthed. 1129 years ago, it was a chaotic war that involved countless races. The Beast Men, who didn't dare to remain silent, invaded the Northlands. It was also a cruel winter where no one expected a war to break out. But that war lasted for a whole 12 years. The people of the Mist died in battle at 1,370,000, and countless more were injured. Out of 10 houses, 9 were empty. And as the protector of the country, the Mist royal family lost 4 kings and 7 members of the royal family. Among them, the youngest was only 5 years old, and it had only been 12 days since he ascended to the throne and died in battle. From then on, it became our tradition to have the prince as our general. Every young child has to receive training in swordsmanship and horsemanship, because no one knows if they will be of use one day. And once they are on the battlefield, regardless of their gender or age, they only have 2 choices: to return victorious, or to die gloriously in battle. And another new tradition is that when the king dies in battle, the prince takes his place. When the prince dies in battle, the princess takes his place, and when the princess dies in battle, the queen takes her place. As long as the royal family exists, the resistance will never stop. From the start, on the battlefield, those of the Mist bloodline like us will always be captured, because our enemies know that captives are meaningless. After all, there have been too many seniors who have made their choice. Surrender. Be captured. How can we, the younger generation, afford to lose our face? We should just find a pillar and knock ourselves to death. 700 years ago, that sudden war was a dagger that came from the back. The sudden rise of the foreign slave trade represented endless bloodshed, but also endless wealth. And our Mist Kingdom blocked the golden path to riches. Thus, a large number of high-quality weapons were shipped to the hands of the Beast Men. After that cruel war with the Beast Men, we ignored the desolation of our land and directly declared war on the countries behind the scenes. In the end, how could those weak southerners be compared to our steeds who had experienced countless battles? When our knight dragged those stupid crowned corpses through the streets of every city, no country dared to look down on our people of the Mist. Of course, from then on, our relationship with the human countries has never been good, but we have never regretted it. Again and again, our disaster-ridden country has encountered countless looting and wars, but unknowingly, we've become an ancient country with a long history. This is undoubtedly a wonderful irony that is surprising to everyone. We, the wild flowers that no one cared for, survived the cold winds of the northern lands, but those little saplings that were carefully cared for in the southern greenhouses mysteriously withered one after another. 300 years ago, I personally experienced it. The ferocious and warlike beast men, the cunning and powerful demons, and the treacherous human allies. Everything that our ancestors had faced, they all came at once. That time, it was all my fault. We couldn't withstand it, and because of that, our country was destroyed. His low voice carried a hint of sobbing, and the silent pain and self-blame made one's heart ache. But the people of the mist in the city would repeat the same answer. They had different opinions. No, our prince, you have already done very well. We are proud of you, so please don't blame yourself. Also, we haven't been destroyed. As long as the people of the mist still exist, how can the Mist Kingdom not be revived? Yes, we haven't been destroyed. The will of the mist will never be destroyed. But even if the Mist Kingdom has been destroyed, our people of the mist haven't. Do you know? When I found out that the Mist Kingdom was formed by the people of the mist in the northern lands, I was so happy that I couldn't sleep for the entire night. Even though it is no longer the country that I know of, and it has already been split into several parts, as long as it still stands in the northern lands, I am satisfied. Countless times, I couldn't sleep for days and nights when I thought of my homeland, but whenever I thought of the hatred of the destruction of my country, I swore that if I didn't take revenge and make the culprit pay 10 times the price, I would never allow myself to live a peaceful life. And when I finally got my revenge, I no longer had the courage to return to my homeland. Everyone that I knew is already dead, and the owner of the land there is no longer recognizable. My dear prince, please don't hesitate. This will forever be your home, and we are all your family. We welcome your return at any time. I smiled. How could I not smile happily in front of such cute people? But when I saw the man in front of me who was like a puddle of mud, my joy turned into anger, and I couldn't help but get angry. But, you, Fummelcasso, you clearly have the bloodline of the will of the mist flowing in your body, yet you did such a preposterous thing. I once thought that he was just an imposter who had nothing to do with the mist royalty, but after meeting him face to face and using the secret technique passed down in my family, I was surprised to find that he really had the bloodline of the mist royalty. To think that the descendants of the mist would fall to such an extent. You, arrogant, lustful, and shameless. Sleware, it is a good thing that you know how to be flexible. Back then, we suffered enough because we didn't know how to be flexible. But being flexible doesn't mean that you are corrupted. You got involved in the sinful slave trade and sent your people to be abused by the beast men. Are you worthy to call yourself a king who protects your people? You are not worthy to be a king. You, ungrateful, greedy, and selfish. You caused our homeland to be humiliated, while you hid in the palace to enjoy fine wine, delicacies, and beauties. The warning I gave you was treated as waste paper. Countless people who should have survived died because of you, but you happily enjoyed the sacrifices of your people. You still have the face to call yourself a king who is above all the lords, the one who has the responsibility of protecting your country. You are not worthy to be a king. You, cowardly, despicable, and disregarding honor. The will of our ancestors has never been extinguished. Our ancestors, Valkyrie, have always been watching over us. If they were still alive, Valkyrie would be able to descend to the mortal world. They would have strangled you to death long ago. You actually dare to surrender? In the 1,700 years of history of the Mist royal family, the number of kings who died on the battlefield is innumerable. Not a single coward would surrender. You are not worthy to be a king. I, Roland Mist, in the name of the 56th king of the Mist Kingdom, deprive my descendant, the king of sin, Fummelcasso, of the throne. I, the ancient frigid Morgui Mingaroin, the companion of the previous king, the first member of the royal family, am here to witness the abdication of the previous king. I also recommend Roland Mist to temporarily take over the duties of the Mist King. I will be the supervising official. The citizens and royal guards were stunned for a moment. Then, someone shouted, "Long live His Majesty Roland." Everyone was boiling with excitement. Your Highness Roland, no, Your Majesty Roland, welcome back. Your Highness Roland, you are overthinking things. We welcome you at any time. Soon, under the urging of some people, cheers resounded through the skies. To be able to gain the support of the citizens so easily, from a certain perspective, it was all thanks to Fummel's outrageous actions. Among the crowd, a young couple was complaining to each other. Why do you have to force me to shout? Roland is very familiar with my voice. He'll definitely recognize it and make fun of me. You have already made him suffer so many times. Let him laugh at you. Right, how's the injury on your right arm? I'm fine. That Beastman shaman's injury is more serious than mine. The others are just pretending to tell a story and aren't injured at all. And when everything was made known to the public, when the outcome was determined, I mercilessly threw Phizma, who was left with only half a breath, down the cliff. Ah! Fummel's shrill screams reverberated through the air. If he landed on the ground, he definitely wouldn't survive. Some women and children had already closed their eyes, unable to bear to see the pitiful scene of Fummel turning into meat paste. However, I firmly locked onto Fummel and didn't relax my grip at all. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk as expected, just as Fummel was about to fall to his death, a pair of bat wings suddenly extended from his back. With a sudden flap, he glided out of the city. Damn it. He really is a demon. My expected guess was confirmed, but it wasn't good news at all. A descendant of the mist combined with a demon's bloodline. No matter how I thought about it, there was only one possibility. Cavendish. Did you do all of this? Did you set all of this up? Chapter 168. What were the demonkin? The Holy Church was probably the one who had the final say on this question. Those mixed-blood bastards are born to destroy and scheme. They should all be dragged to the public square and burned at the stake. Alright, I seem to have asked the wrong person. This priest who spoke passionately was obviously a revivalist. In recent times, due to certain reasons, the Holy Church underwent internal reforms. Their attitude towards the demonkin also changed from burn them to death on sight to imprison them for life on sight. Although the Holy Church's reforms could only be described as the pot calling the kettle black, if I had to say, from a certain point of view, their approach wasn't wrong. Demonkin, as the name implied, were the descendants of demons and devils. Their bloodline contained mystical powers, allowing them to use mystical supernatural abilities. They were natural warlocks, and it was said that more than half of the current demon warlocks were demonkin with mixed blood from the lower planes flowing through their veins. If the dormant bloodline was under control, they could become natural warlocks. But if they lost control to the point where demonic traits appeared, perhaps the term half-demon or half-devil would be more suitable for these existences who obviously weren't suited to live in the mortal plane. Compared to the bloodline of the upper planes, angels, which was welcomed and even looked up to by the people, the demonkin were usually a huge problem. Apart from the bloodthirsty and chaotic tendencies in their bloodline, the bigger problem was that the source of their bloodline was often still running amok in the lower planes. Although angels were inclined towards order and served the gods, they didn't have strong wills to begin with. They wouldn't interfere with the lives of their descendants, and it was difficult for them to do so. And in the eyes of demons, their mixed-blood descendants were the living wealth of their own bloodline. The power and bloodline that originated from their own bloodline was the best symbol and rope. Perhaps the demonkin were naturally kind, brave, and good at fighting, but under the never-ending whispers of their demon ancestors, there would always be subtle changes that leaned towards chaos. For the great demons, a descendant with their own bloodline would be a good seedling on the battlefield. They would summon the descendant from their bloodline, causing the descendant to excitedly discover that they were becoming stronger and stronger, but they were unable to control their own demonic talents and turned into half-demons. In the end, they could only return to the lower planes and become the backbone of the new demons. And in the endless abyss of war, these youngsters who were under their control were doubtlessly the best pawns and elites in war. Mixed-blood bastards destined to fall was another name given to these demonkin by the people of the world. In all the planes, this group of mixed-bloods had never had a good reputation. Perhaps a certain pitiful demonkin was kind-hearted and had done good deeds for half of her life, and was highly praised by the people. Or perhaps she was a chess piece that a certain demon monarch had spent 100 years laying out, and would play an important role at a critical moment. That's right. Speaking up to this point, many things were now quite clear. This was the information that Eliza had received from the Chaos Abyss. The descendants of the Mist Kingdom in the north were the direct bloodline of a certain demon lord. Currently, the Mist Kingdom was split into several parts. The largest parts were Donglan and Sluware. That demonkin was probably one of them, But as for which one, I wasn't sure. That was why I could only increase my guard against Renee and leave her alone for a period of time. And now, it seemed that the demon kin was probably the royal family of the Sleware Kingdom. Even though the situation still wasn't optimistic, I inexplicably heaved a sigh of relief in the depths of my heart. Then, my expression became even more serious. Cavendish, just what do you want? My angry roar reverberated through the skies. Even if that Fummel Casso had 12 extra wings, how could he possibly escape my pursuit? At this moment, he was stabbed into the wall by Roland's sacred sword. He clutched his chest in disbelief. No, I can't go back yet. I don't want to go back. I want to enjoy the beauty of this world. There are too many beauties and delicious food in the mortal plane. I don't want to go back yet. I'm not satisfied yet. I still want to be king. I don't want to die. The scales all over his body had a strange white jade-like luster, and his crimson eyes now had a dim yellow color. This was the sign of a powerful demon. Unknowingly, Fummel had long since completed his transformation from a demonkin to a half-demon. Powerful demons were capable of establishing a soul connection through bloodline to tempt their descendants. Perhaps in those false nightmares created by demons, Fummel had already returned to the mortal plane countless times. He even had the misconception that he had long since become a demon. Looking at his completely demonized, dim yellow eyes, I knew that there was no saving him. A fallen soul like him could only return to the river Styx. Demon. His Majesty. No, that damned false king is a demon. Amidst everyone's exclamations, the royal guards also put down their weapons in astonishment. Not a single person was willing to fight for Fummel anymore. After all, demons had the reputation of being a public enemy no matter how one looked at it. Answer me, Cavendish. Just what are you intending to do? Even though Fummel was about to die, I still strained my neck and questioned him. The target of my questioning was the person hiding behind me. Hee. With that familiar light chuckle, black flames ignited around Fummel. The demon lord's will had finally descended upon Fummel as it sensed my anger. Dark clouds suddenly gathered together with that strange light chuckle. The sunlight was blocked by the dark clouds, and the sun that had just risen could no longer be seen. It was as if even the gods in the sky didn't want to see this scene. This wasn't any magic at all. It was merely the influence of the demon prince's will descending upon the world. I was rather astonished to see this power. Cavendish was even stronger than I had expected. Just the descent of his will is enough to change the weather. He's probably at the main god level. In my eyes, Cavendish's power level was probably bottomless. He definitely wouldn't be any weaker than any main god from the Chaos faction. Roland, I never expected that we would meet so soon. You're actually asking me what I want to do. At this moment, Fummel's body was already beginning to burn. Even though his weak physical body had demonized, it was still unable to withstand the tremendous power of the demon prince's descent. Fummel's distorted face suddenly revealed a familiar expression. It was a mischievous expression filled with childishness. Since you're asking so sincerely, I'll be merciful and tell you. Did you really think that I would say such a thing? You want to know? Guess. Guess your younger sister. Hee. Isn't your younger sister also my younger sister? What a pity. Compared to an older brother, I'm more looking forward to a cute younger sister. Besides, if I were to tell you just because you asked, that wouldn't be giving me any face. No matter what, I'm a demon prince. How am I supposed to be the boss if word of this gets out? Just like before, I'll leave the good stuff for later. The mystery will only be revealed at the end for it to be interesting. As the demonic flames continued to burn, Fummel's body was reduced to ashes. However, his final message was transmitted to me. Roland, it seems that we'll meet again very soon. Oh my, should I call you older brother? It seems that I still can't bring myself to call you that right in front of you. It's time. I'll forget about it this time. The Holy War has only just begun. We'll have plenty of opportunities to slowly play around. Fummel's physical body was reduced to ashes. Now that the will of the demon lord who had been chatting so intensely had lost its host, everything returned to normal. The dark clouds also began to disperse on their own, allowing sunlight to shine down once more. Everything returned to normal. Damn it. I viciously punched the ground, but my nameless rage was destined to be unrequited. While the war in the Northlands was still reaching its climax, Shiluor's civil war was already nearing its end. Victor? There was no victor at all. Even though the royalty faction, which had always remained neutral, suddenly chose to side with Omar, this war still maintained a cruel balance of power. The reason why the balance of power was described as cruel was because in such a situation, if both sides kept adding fuel to the fire, the final result would be that both sides were heavily injured, and there would be no victor. No matter what the outcome was, countless elites from both sides had died in battle. The war between the undead usually ended with the complete destruction of the other party's soul. After losing a large number of their core members, the Shiluor Empire was destined to be reduced from a mega-empire to an ordinary strong country. However, when a small squadron of cavalry suddenly joined the battle and ambushed the Dark Knight Council's headquarters, the scales of victory tilted in their favor. It wasn't that they were powerful, but that the Mist War flag they raised only represented one person, and those Crimson Mad Dogs only fought for their master Emperor Yongye. At first, the undead lords thought that the Red Hound Legion was a fake. After all, the historical records stated that the Red Hound Legion had mysteriously fallen in the Civil War. However, when the terrifying giant black dog appeared among the skeletal knights, all doubts were no longer necessary. The demonic void hound Bastion. His back. Only that lord can dispel him. There were even more conspiracy theorists who thought that they had seen through everything. As expected, all of this is that lord's conspiracy. Omar, Reinhardt, Meat-Eater, and Grier were all that lord's subordinates. It must be that lord who lured the second senator to release his seal, and then used his ability to cause a civil war. The royal faction intervened at the crucial moment to take back the imperial power. There is only one truth, and that is definitely the plot. Alright, let's not talk about how this mystery detective attributed everything to a conspiracy. The appearance of the Crimson Hunting Hounds had undoubtedly become a huge rock pressing on their chests. After all, the news of Emperor Yongye's return had already spread, and when this king really returned, perhaps everyone would have to consider which side to stand on. The only demigod undead emperor in the modern era. If this flag wasn't scary enough, then he also had the dazzling halo of being the strongest necromancer in the modern era. This was more realistic than anything else. No matter how strong a necromancer or a lich was, there was still a limit to the strength of a necromancer. Before estimating the combat power of a necromancer, the undead warriors under him must be included. However, the limits of the Crimson Hunting Hounds under Emperor Yongye had yet to be evaluated, because they had never been defeated before. In other words, no one had ever seen the limits of Emperor Yongye's strength. In fact, that was indeed the case. Infallible Defender was one of my trump cards that I had been hiding. I had intentionally kept it a secret, and I had only used it twice in total. Basically, all the opponents I had seen using it had died. The standard tactic of a necromancer was to use their strongest undead warriors as guards and vanguards to delay their enemies. Then, they would use their most powerful magic to bombard the entire battlefield, hoping to end the battle in one fell swoop. This was what Emperor Yongye did too. However, when the guard and vanguard were replaced by the undefeated Crimson Hunting Hounds, and when the ultimate magic that decided the battle was replaced by the rarely seen Ice Eon, it was hard to fathom. There weren't many semigod mags in the first place, and the number of famous mags who could use such a destructive forbidden spell could be counted on one hand. However, to throw out the forbidden spell like it was cabbage, completely disregarding the consequences and the damage it would cause to his own body, probably only Emperor Yongye would be able to do so. Dozens of kingdoms had used their own destruction to prove the strength and shamelessness of this tactic. If they couldn't break through the blockade of the Crimson Hunting Hounds before Emperor Yongye could complete the forbidden spell, they would probably fall into eternal slumber along with the entire army. Back then, the Yongye army didn't even need to attack a city. The moment Emperor Yongye cast the spell, the war would immediately enter the final battle. Most of the time, it was a field battle where the living attacked crazily and the undead defended with all their might. Fighting a war of attrition against the endless undead army was also a time-limited war with a deathmatch attached. The trump card squadrons with glorious histories would always fall to the weak skeleton soldiers in exhaustion. This was the best evidence of this shameless combination of tactics. Furthermore, many of the backbones of the Dark Knight Council used to be the main force of the Yongye army in the past, so how could they not understand Emperor Yongye's habit of planning before taking action? If you don't have a 60% chance of winning, then don't fight the final battle. Let the outcome of the battle be decided before the battle starts, and let the opponent die in the most frustrating way possible. This emperor had such a wretched style of war, and when the Crimson Hunting Hounds charged into the battlefield, it would probably be the moment when Emperor Yongye decided to personally reap the spoils of war. To the undead lords, it was naturally a joy to watch their enemies die, but now that they were standing in front of this emperor, Emperor Yongye might be preparing a forbidden spell. I feel a little stomachache, I'm going out to relieve myself. Hey, you're a skeleton mage, right? When did you get a stomachache? My wife is about to give birth, I'm going back. A certain Death Knight said so. Although it was a short sentence, the hidden message was too much, causing the audience to be stunned. My lover is about to give birth, I'm going back too. Alright, another Death Knight lord was also shameless, but following that, the two of them who were supposed to be fighting each other revealed an expression of mutual appreciation. How can you be so shameless? Ah, I learned it from you. Alright, everything was left unsaid. In the end, when the pressure of Emperor Yongye once again pressed down on their heads, the cohesiveness that the Dark Knight Council painstakingly built up was completely scattered, and when the Crimson Hunting Hounds really killed their way to the headquarters, they found that there was no one there. The internal war of Shiluor Empire had ended, and the news of the second Senator Feiman leading the majority of his army to escape to the Undead Plain became the most important news, and very quickly, it spread across the entire world. While I was having a hard time dealing with the chaos in front of me, in a certain dimension, someone was smiling happily. What did I do? Hee, I didn't do anything, I was just playing around. Fuml is my descendant, so naturally, he is a demon descendant. Sigh, he was originally a decent character, I just called him to play 2 rounds of chess with me, and he actually became like this. Mortals are really weak. The young man who was laughing was rather handsome, and his smile was rather natural, but if one were to look at the environment he was in, it would be very abnormal. Look at my expression at that time, I was completely dumbfounded. Guess. I didn't even think of the answer myself, how would you have guessed it? He was lying in the void, there was nothing in the void, the only thing that stood out was a gigantic chessboard, and the chess pieces on it were exceptionally eye-catching. The chess pieces were all alive, they were wailing souls, and every one of them, their strength was not lower than legend, they were probably the heroes of the mortal world. And the seat opposite him was empty, only the chess pieces were moving on their own. The North. Mist Kingdom. Conspiracy. None of my business, I just wanted to have fun. My little cuties, let me see your potential, I hope you won't disappoint me like Fuml. Perhaps, this was the reason why Cavendish was able to rise to such a level so quickly with his willfulness. There was no good or evil, only fun or not. When he was in the mood, he would leave behind 2 seeds, send out a few capable generals to rebuild the Mist Kingdom, and when he was in a bad mood, he would flip the table and not do it. From a certain standpoint, Cavendish's personality was the true essence of chaos. The most perfect chaos demon, beloved of chaos, bastard of the chaos goddess, those who dared to call themselves this have all died, these were the nicknames that Cavendish created in the lower planes. His style of doing things was completely unpredictable, he used the innocent smile of a child to create tragedies that even demons couldn't bear to see, he was the son of the abyss, completely in line with the essence of chaos, he only used a little more than 300 years to achieve countless achievements, stepping over countless corpses to enter the highest palace. Now, he had an even more resounding nickname, Supreme of Chaos, the 14th main god of the Chaos faction. Roland's guess was completely wrong, even Cavendish himself didn't know what he planned to do next. And the current Cavendish, apart from the Chaos goddess who was in a deep sleep, could no longer be commanded by anyone else. When he was in the mood to play, there was no longer any existence that could stop Cavendish's game. This time, old brother, I'm going to play with you, it should make me really happy. Winning against my older brother in a game of strategy, that was one of my dreams in the past. Old brother, You're indeed good at guessing, but guess what I'm going to do next, even I haven't thought of it yet. Chapter 169. Foolish carbon-based monkey, you actually dare to look down on my existence. I am the omniscient magic mirror. Is that so? What is 169,2321 times 768392? Answer me in 3 seconds. 1,303,365,917,832. You must be dumbfounded. Do you think that my almighty creator would forget to add a calculator to me? The silver-haired muscular man was stunned for a moment, but he didn't reply. He was still calculating himself. Even if you're right, let me say this first, it's not like I don't know how to calculate. My father taught me how to multiply. Just by looking at his appearance, this muscular handsome man was practically a living hero that walked out of an ancient myth. He was tall and muscular, with a tiger's back and a bear's waist, and he had delicate features. Alright, I know that this is contradictory. Isn't there a strange creature called Li Godan in this world? Then, next question, other than my father, who is the most beautiful person in this world? Of course it's you, respected Lord Omar. Your beauty is second only to His Highness Roland. Haha. You're too honest. I'm starting to like you a little. Have you eaten lunch? Why don't we eat together later? Haha. Although you're incomparably handsome, there's obviously something wrong with your brain. I'm a mirror. How am I supposed to eat? Looking at this half-naked muscular man who was counting with his fingers while doing all kinds of bodybuilding poses in front of the mirror, even if he didn't have a stomach, Lionheart still felt nauseous. Should I say that this is a perfect match? As expected of His Highness Roland, just a small gift and he managed to make the stubborn Omar so much more docile. His body was full of muscles that gave off a healthy and oily sheen. Yet, his face just so happened to have a delicate and pretty face that was 70% similar to me. From a certain standpoint, Omar's very existence was a part of my dark history. Yes, the Li Godan in front of him was pride of the 7 deadly sins. In reality, he really couldn't blame himself for looking like this. Roland had constructed his 7 deadly sins based on the standard template of the undead. Envy and gluttony were both based on the abomination-stitched monster, while pride of the 7 deadly sins was similar to greed, a mutated spiritual creature based on the banshee. According to the original design, he was supposed to be an artificial soul with no face, no physical body, and no gender. However, as he grew up, he actually chose this appearance of his own, which was quite incomprehensible. But in reality, this was all because of the nonsense I spouted when he was just born. As a man, a strong body is the true beauty. Alright then. And so, the ignorant pride saw Roland as the truth, and as a creature that instinctively viewed its own mother as the most beautiful, pride unhesitatingly used Roland's physical appearance. Everyone knew that Roland had died far too early, and the portraits he left behind were mainly of him when he was 11 or 12 years old. As a result, this child with an aesthetic bias was born. Originally, some slight misunderstandings could still be corrected, but Roland was too busy, so busy that he was at war, at that time, and Omar didn't pay attention to other people's words, so the child became worse and worse, and finally became the most beautiful appearance in his eyes. The child's parents knew him better than the child himself. No one knew Omar's personality and preferences better than Roland, so Roland only had to make a magic mirror with flowery words for him, and it was very easy to buy over this child who was only a few years old. That's right, just a few years old. He rebelled and was sealed away only a few years after he was born, and he couldn't feel the time when he was sealed away, so naturally his personality would be the same when he was released. Since Shiluor's civil war had ended, as the only victor, Omar would soon completely control this country, and with his ability, he would definitely bring himself and this country to a higher level. Pride Omar's ability? Actually, it was quite complicated to explain. That was a special ability system, and not a single ability. Pride came from the level of one's level. In Roland's understanding, as the superior who controlled the life and death of the inferior, they were often unreasonable to the inferior, thinking that they stood at the top and looked down on the inferior as if they were ants. This was the root of pride as the original sin. Undead also had levels, so was it possible to create a natural undead ruler, giving him the ability to rule over the immortal undead? This was undoubtedly an unimaginable topic, But Roland got the inspiration from the queen bee and the queen ant's natural rule over the tribe. They used special pheromones to form a special network, and used a strange way of communication to control the entire tribe, making the entire tribe sacrifice themselves for them, even to the point of death. And the reason why he chose the banshee as the basic model was that the banshee was one of the few undead that didn't have any low-level existence. They were purely made up of souls, so it was very suitable to use as a link to the soul network. Finally, the final result of the research was Omar himself. He was also the only undead that didn't use any additional materials, and all of it was created by Roland himself. From this point of view, it was not wrong for him to call Roland his father. The highest authority in the undead network was the name of Omar's comprehensive ability. He could build a spiritual network that constantly exchanged information among the undead under him, and as the network administrator with the highest authority, he controlled everything of the undead under him. This was Omar's only ability. It didn't sound very powerful, but it was ridiculously powerful when put to use. Low-level undead did not have intelligence, but he could give them fake intelligence. On the battlefield, he was like an invisible hand of command. He could command the undead under him to do even the slightest movement of a finger. Normal undead needed to be at least silver tier to have their own consciousness, but he could give countless undead false self-awareness. It could be said that under his control, the low-level undead that could only be used as cannon fodder would at least have their combat power increased by at least 3 times. And this was just the beginning. Omar's ability was far from that simple. Souls were power. The souls of low-level undead and high-level undead would be linked to the undead network. How could he be weak when he controlled the souls of other undead? Giving false consciousness would not increase his burden. On the contrary, it allowed him to extract the power of souls to strengthen himself. When Omar had 300 low-level undead as his subordinates, he would only have bronze-rank combat strength. When he had 3,000 undead as his subordinates, Omar would be able to fight against a silver-rank warrior. When he had 30,000 undead as his subordinates, he would be able to instantly kill a gold-rank human. If he had an entire undead empire under his control, even I, the creator of the story, would be unable to estimate just how powerful he would become. From this, it could be seen that Omar's ability was obviously biased towards army warfare. From the beginning, Pride Omar was designed to be the commander of the undead army. Roland also spent a few times more effort than the other 7 deadly sins. His design did not fail. The reason why it ended up like that was because of his personality. I was born to be the highest authority under my father. Why should I listen to you old men? Why should that stupid dog sit in my position and lead the army that should have been under my control? I want to take back my undead army and build a kingdom that belongs to the undead. This is my natural duty, and also my father's expectations for me. I was born to be a king. Alright, for the undead that were made up of resentment, the more stubborn a soul was, the more potential it had, but if one's personality was too much, naturally there was no way to control it. In the end, it would naturally be a rebellious child rebelling. But from a certain point of view, back then, Roland did not push things too far. On the contrary, he left some leeway, which was why there was the possibility of communication now. Omar's true ability was only known to the 7 deadly sins and Roland himself. The other undead lords only thought that he had a strong ability to control the undead, underestimating him. The moment Feyman handed over the undead army to him, it was destined that the civil war in Shiluor would break out sooner or later. Omar couldn't even tolerate the fact that his own brother Bastet was ranked above him, so how could the arrogant Omar possibly accept an old Lich being ranked above him? Thus, according to Roland's estimation, when the second Senator Feyman of Shiluor released Omar, it was equivalent to digging his own grave. Now that the civil war in Shiluor had reached this stage, it was also time to make a choice. So, Roland made a choice in advance, letting Omar ascend the throne, and chasing Feyman into the undead plane. At this moment, it was time for Omar to return the favor. I understand father's intention. I also like the gift. Wait for me to reorganize a little. I will fulfill my promise, and send an army to the north to help father end the war. Originally, it was Roland who personally sealed Omar. Reinhard thought that it would be difficult to communicate with him, but now that he was so easy to deal with, it was unbelievable. Hearing this, Reinhard hesitated. He was worried that Omar might have some conspiracy. As if seeing Reinhard's hesitation, Omar added, In the seal, I have also considered a lot. Maybe I did go a little too far back then. Also, Father, who has always treated traitors without mercy, was lenient to me. No matter what, I have to accept this favor. Lenient? Didn't His Majesty Roland say that Omar's ability was special, and could only be sealed, not killed? Reinhard was full of doubts. Can only be sealed, not killed. To the omnipotent Father, how could there be such a thing? The 7 deadly sins were all created by Him. We all have backdoors that He left behind. At least not being able to control the other 7 deadly sins is one of my weaknesses. Also, even though he was talking about his weakness, that proud look on his face made it seem like it was a gift from the heavens. Suddenly, Omar was a little embarrassed. His huge and muscular body was coy like a woman, and his delicate and handsome face was covered with a mysterious blush. Also, I hope that Father can help me, create someone like me. I just entered puberty this year. I also want to fall in love. As he said, Li Godan was still shaking and twisting his huge body, his face was red, his eyes closed as he fell into a reverie, as if he was thinking of something embarrassing. My request is not high at all. I don't want those short bean sprouts, as long as they are as tall, strong, and beautiful as me. Yes, even stronger than me is fine, but the face must not be ugly, a strong back with a bear's waist and delicate features, that's the best. Reinhard was extremely envious of the weak humans. At least they had the ability to vomit blood and die, while he could only endure the rolling thunder in front of him. Although it's a little embarrassing, I'm also the king of a country. A few more choices shouldn't be too much. I have long dreamed of organizing a beauty contest under the moon. I have a posture, I'm proud. It's a little embarrassing to say it out loud. At that moment, Reinhard regretted his outstanding imagination. He thought that if this request was fulfilled, there would be a group of handsome muscular brothers posing under the moon every day, and they would even call themselves this servant. Reinhard had the urge to hit the wall and die. Blurg. And then, the inexplicable feeling of nausea, and the colleagues who started to vomit behind him, proved that even the undead had a limit of tolerance for nausea. I will tell His Majesty. Then, please stay away from me, Lord Omar. I have no love for muscles. Chapter 170. Even in the north, where resources were scarce, the kingdom of the elves was still a rare place. Man-made cliffs and magical crystal walls became the artificial barrier of the capital, Santander. Endless cold-resistant ancient pines became the best windshield. The ancient elven spring and magical spring water spread, bringing warmth and vitality to the land, giving it a green vitality rarely seen in the north. While the humans in the north were vexed by the starving beasts during the winter, the elves' nature priests and hunters successfully tamed the beasts into obedient livestock. While the northern kingdoms were busy for an entire year in order to obtain rations during the long winter, the fruit trees under the control of the elven ancient tree only ripened 3 times a year. All sorts of sweet fruits that were out of season could only rot if they weren't exported in time for resources. A centipede died but never fell down. The kingdom of the elves that inherited the legacy of the great elven empire did indeed have the foundation to look down on the humans. With a lifespan of 100 years, they had time and technology. How could they not change the environment they lived in? The wild elves living in tree houses in Knight's novels were obviously the result of artistic processing. While the Tassel Empire's main army was galloping through the snowy lands in the north, their country was as peaceful as ever. Young unicorns and pagazi chased each other in the forest, and the elven commoners in the cities even had the time to organize winter rituals. As for the battle at the front lines, they did not think that the powerful allied forces of the 4 elven kingdoms would fall in the hands of ordinary humans, not to mention that the elites of the 4 kingdoms were fighting with all their might. That was indeed the case. The elven army of more than 100,000 wasn't a large number, but due to their extremely high average combat strength, any one of the elite teams could serve as the royal guards of any country. They would be a mighty force even if they were placed on the entire continent, and definitely couldn't be underestimated. This was the foundation of the elves. Even in modern times, the only weakness of the kingdom of the elves that inherited the ancient magic arts was the number of elves. It took 200 years for an elf to grow from birth to adulthood. If it was humans who married at an early age, it would definitely take 6 or 7 generations, if not 10. In a war, it was a battle of comprehensive national strength. Population and human resources were definitely one of the most important factors. It was impossible for people to not die. Even the most powerful magician could be accidentally killed on the battlefield by stray arrows or friendly fire. It could take 200 to 300 years to make up for the losses of a war. The weakness of the elves was that they could not afford a war of attrition. This time, if the main forces suffered too many losses, the elves would have to enter a long period of recuperation. It could be said that the elves of the north had given their all in order to win this gamble. Now that the main forces had been deployed, since the major armies had already left the country, the usual border patrols were handed over to the rangers' self-organized second-line armies, or perhaps adventurer squads. A wild elf ranger, 2 or 3 centaur archers, and 1 or 2 elven warriors would form a standard elven patrol team. If it was a first-line battle team, perhaps there would be 1 or 2 more elven ancient trees, nature priests, and Pegasus knights. Even among the elves, Druil, who preferred to live in the woods instead of living in comfortable cities, was a minority. No matter where, as long as there were intelligent creatures, trees would always be one of the most important resources. Not only could trees be used as basic materials for buildings and furniture, but exquisite elven art would also require rare wood as raw materials. In the northern lands, where there were rare and precious forests, the elves' high-quality wood was a major export. But if Druil, whose highest duty was to protect the forest, could be reasonable, they wouldn't have been treated as terrorists by the various countries. The Druil was stubborn, and so were the elves. When the two were combined, the elven Druil was super stubborn. Their extreme nature conservation organization was the source and mentor of other green terrorist organizations, and their various operational methods were regarded as classic examples. The name No Logging Little Bear Alliance sounded cute, but it had a history of tens of thousands of years. They had always been the Druil terrorist organization that gave the elven countries headaches. They had a secret method of transforming into a giant bear and taming beasts. Maybe one of the grizzly bears in the forest was their spy. Maybe when you were happily logging while humming a song, the giant bear that suddenly stood on its hind legs behind you was already planning to flatten you. The result was that the elves were the origin of Druil, and also the most numerous Druil, but most of the Druil still had a superficial occupation that was acceptable to the world. But at this time, in the temporary campsite, the wild elf ranger Tasia, who was humming a little tune for dinner, was a hidden Druil master. She was also a member of the Little Bear Alliance, but recently she did not fulfill her duty of protecting nature. The cost of feeding the pets that Tasia domesticated was not a small amount, and before fulfilling her duty, she was working hard to earn money to support her family. And accepting the kingdom's employment to carry out some military missions that were not considered dangerous, to fill the gap in the kingdom's military forces, was a very profitable deal. In this special period, the wealthy kingdom of the elves was not stingy, and the double the pay during wartime attracted countless mercenaries. This time we really earned a lot, just patrolling the border can earn us so much. I hope that the war continues for a long time. I still hope that the cowards in the city will continue to raise the pay. If the war escalates, don't mention triple the pay, even 10 times the pay is possible. Tasia's words did not sound like an elf at all, but the centaurs in her team were already familiar with her personality. On the contrary, compared to the elven nobles in the city, the centaurs, who generally did not have a high status in the kingdom of the elves, preferred Tasia's straightforwardness and easygoing personality. Don't say such things in the city, it will make those elves unhappy. Centaur Bol laughed. Calculating the recent increase in pay, he had earned a lot this time, so naturally he was in a good mood. In the past, the army's duties were not this easy. They still have to search for those slave hunters all over the mountains and wilderness. That is not an easy job, and if they really run into them, if they meet the sword saints and archmages sent by the human kingdoms, who knows who would be caught. In the past, there were many patrol squads that went missing because of this. Tasia's smile widened even more. That's true, now those slave hunters really can't give me any trouble. The trouble they caused themselves is not small. What a pity, Princess Swana. Sigh, what a pity, good people don't get rewarded. Thinking of that gentle figure, even Tasia, who always disliked the superior elves, was filled with dissatisfaction. About that matter, I heard a rumor. Yes, it's just a rumor. The silent elven warrior Grover suddenly said, but his words naturally attracted the attention of his teammates. After hesitating for a moment, Grover finally continued. The rumor says that there are many suspicious points in the kidnapping of Princess Swana. The elven army that was supposed to be on duty was suddenly pulled out for training, the ranger army suddenly started training in seclusion, even the Royal Guard's Moonblade was temporarily transferred to the border to deal with the dispute. That's how the not-so-strong slave hunters managed to capture Her Royal Highness. Hearing that, the members of the team maintained a strange silence. It was not that they did not hear this rumor. In the past few weeks, every tavern and market was spreading and discussing this taboo topic. The follow-up of the rumor was also very obvious. There was no way to say that Princess Swana's death was the conspiracy of the Elven King and the Senate. Rather than saying that Princess Swana died in the hands of humans, it was more accurate to say that she was used as a war sacrifice by the cold-blooded Elven King. If there is no evidence, then say less, there will be endless trouble. The carefree Tasia advised Grover to be careful, but just as she finished speaking, the usually kind elven warrior suddenly sneered. No evidence. Isn't the sudden transfer of the two legendary champions who are the Royal Guard's evidence? Anrod, the hand of Kasha who had a good relationship with the princess, directly caused a huge ruckus in the military. It was said that he was so angry that he smashed the signboard of the military. Obviously, Grover before them was part of the peace faction that supported Princess Swana. After their initial anger, they began to calmly think about the cause of the princess's death, and also found some suspicious points. According to the humans, the plotters of political conspiracies are usually the ones who benefit from a series of events. In this case, the human countries obviously didn't benefit at all. The only one who benefited was the pro-war party. That person is also ruthless. Her Highness Swana is his daughter. Alright, these words were already straightforward enough, they were just short of directly pointing at the Elven King and scolding him. Immediately, the temperature in the camp dropped by a few degrees, everyone became silent. After all, for the commoners, participating in this kind of thing was definitely not a good thing. Spies and hidden sentries were not exclusive to humans. If they were to be thrown into prison because of talking too much, it would really be too unlucky. There would be no one to complain about it. And Tasia, who was originally a druid, had even less interest in this kind of thing, although she felt that it was a pity for the princess, but she had no intention of risking her life for her. Thus, she tried her best to change the topic. Ah, there's a dark elf there. All right, a dark elf appearing in the hinterland of the kingdom of the elves. This was obviously nonsense, but it amused Grover instead. He laughed and shook his head. Forget it if you don't want to say, where did the dark elf come from here? Halfway through his sentence, his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. The dark green dagger on his back showed the reason why he fell. Although I don't know how you found me, but since I've been found, I definitely can't let you go back. From Grover's shadow, a figure wearing pitch-black leather armor walked out. That black skin was enough to explain everything. There really is a dark elf. Maybe I can consider changing to a prophet mage. At this moment, Tasia still had the time to sigh at her own jinx. The dark elf scout in front of her was probably at the upper silver level. The poison from the dagger was only a normal paralysis poison. It might be enough to deal with a normal patrol team, but with her hidden legendary druid strength, the scout in front of her was just a slag with a combat power of 5. Aha, eat my rolling stick. And the truth was exactly as expected. The originally slightly ambitious dark elf servant was knocked down by Tasia's ferocious stick in one move. He probably couldn't figure out how an elf archer with a longbow could display such superb stick skills. What was the deal with the paralyzing lightning in the wooden stick? Little guy, you still dare to show off in front of me. Little ones, hurry up and bring the people away. I feel that something is wrong. Maybe he has an accomplice. She could save the rest of the words. The many ghostly figures that scuttled out from the forest had already explained everything. Tasia once again proved her prophecy talent. Tasia, it's better if you don't say anything. At this moment, it was naturally time to run away, considering that in the past adventures, whatever she said was true, only bad things. Centaur Bol, who was running in front, was also full of resentment. But his words did not receive a reply. Turning his head to look, Tasia had already disappeared without a trace. The only thing that stayed there was the grizzly bear who had been napping. As for his teammates, other than the suddenly missing Tasia, all of them had fallen. Command, faint. After hearing a voice, a grey light flashed, and he directly fell to the ground, unconscious. And at this moment, a dark elf priestess riding on a black-armored battle scorpion slowly walked out, and behind her, there were dozens of dark elf scouts with faces full of panic. Foolish males, you can't even deal with such a weak sacrifice. If you mess up the Spider Queen's plan this time, I will cut you into pieces and feed you to the venomous silk spiders alive. In front of her was the angry rebuke of the dark elf priestess, and further away, there was the sound of pounding. Tasia, who had more experience in adventuring than her identity as a ranger, knew that this was the sound of a large number of lizard cavalry marching, and only the most powerful families could afford the expensive lizard cavalry. There was only one possibility for them to use lizard cavalry in an organized formation. High-level priestess rose and the grey lizard cavalry? Damn it, this is not a hunting party looking for sacrifices, this is the entire dark elf army. To send an army to attack the kingdom of the elves at this time, has Rose gone mad? But now was obviously not the time to sigh. When Tasia silently imitated the habits of the grey bear, intending to leave, she was seen by the female priestess. I have been imitating animals for more than 1 or 2 years, I am a professional. So, she directly crouched down, sniffed the fallen elf, and imitated the appearance of a grey bear looking for food. But suddenly, she noticed that the dark light gathered on the priestess's 9-headed whip, as if she had discovered something, so she became a little anxious. I'm sorry, big sister, I will make it up to you in the future. She clenched her teeth, bit her fallen comrade, closed her eyes and chewed. Completely imitating my little Hui's eating form, look at my godly acting. It's time to go. But when he opened his eyes, he found that not only did the dark elves not leave, but they also did not give up on him, on the contrary, they were staring at him, dumbfounded. Phut, ahaha, there is actually a bear eating grass. This druil is too funny. The female priestess was rolling on the back of the armored war scorpion, only then did Tasia realize that there was something wrong with the taste in her mouth, and then looked over, only to find that Grover had already woken up, and was staring at her in shock. It turned out that at this critical moment, Grover had gotten rid of the effects of the paralysis poison, dodging the bloody mouth, and Tasia, who had her eyes closed, bit off a piece of grass, and then began to swallow. Obviously, trying hard to block her taste buds, she would not taste the taste in her mouth, and the result was that she suddenly ate 2 mouthfuls of grass. I am a bear that likes to eat grass. Why, is there a rule that says bears can't eat grass? Eat my bear's paw. All right, Tasia, who always dropped the ball at critical moments, once again used her actions to show what was called stubbornness and anger.